There it is. Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a regular meeting of the City Council of Fort Walton Beach on Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. As I said earlier, if you have a cell phone, if you put it on vibrate or turn it off before the meeting gets going, I would appreciate it. And this evening, we're pleased to have Pastor Natasha Jackson from Fort Walton Beach Church of the Nazarene. Will you please stand for the invocation and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Natasha, it's all yours.
Please bow your heads as I pray. Dear Heavenly Father, on behalf of all who are gathered here today, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us to arrive and meet here safely. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health that we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for the freedoms you provide and the freedoms we enjoy in our country. In the scriptures, you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of city officials, and in particular for this assembled council. I am asking that you graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Fort Walton Beach. It is in your holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Council, if we could get a motion to approve the agenda, that would be great.
The only modification I would request is that we table the crew of bowl eggs item for 2 months from now to give them a chance to go through a change of command and be ready to present it at a later date.
So that'd be item 11.1. I'd like to remove that from the agenda for tonight.
Yes, please.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Meade, seconded by Councilman Allegretto to approve the agenda as presented, minus item 11.1, which will be moved a couple months down the road.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Comments?
Yes, sir.
Council, please vote. Does pass unanimously. Thank you, Council. Next item is item number 5, recognitions. City of Fort Walton Beach employee recognitions. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as you all know, once a month we like to bring our employees that have been with the city on multiples of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years and so forth. So we do have 5 to announce tonight. There are some here. I do see in the audience, and the ones that did not make it tonight, we'll make sure the director gets that and he gives it to them. But we have Nathan Chapin, 5 years. We have Kevin Mullins, 5 years. We have Amy Nelson Wolf, and she is here. I saw her. All right, up next, we have David Trim, 15 years, and David Trim is here, unfortunately, David Trim is retiring in August. He's had a lifelong full of golf management, and we wish him the best in retirement, but we would like to give him a round of applause for his 15 years, but also on his retirement. It's well deserved. That's right. And we have Doug Fowler, 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. That brings us to item number 6, the consent agenda. Council, may we get a motion?
Mayor, I move the consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Allegretto, seconded by Councilman Meade to approve the consent agenda as presented. Further comment?
No, sir.
Comment? Council, please vote. Does pass unanimously. Thank you, Council. Brings us to mayor and council comments. That's item 7, and Mr. Meade, we're going to start with you.
I'll save it for the end. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt?
Mr. Peters, are you going to bring up in your city manager report some of the traffic management, some of the updates, and some of the things that we've been doing since, okay, then I'll hold off and then wait for that update. Appreciate it, Mr.
All right, sir. Mr. Smith?
I'll wait till the end as well, Mayor.
All right. Mr. Walker?
One quick question for Nicole. I've been having trouble with my email. I found that there was a setting of sending stuff to archive, so I don't know how long ago. Apparently you sent an email out about the new financial software that we can go in and click around. Does it have login information and that kind of stuff, or is it public?
It's public.
It's public. Is it also on our website so that
It's on
public?
our website, yeah.
Perfect.
Do you
Okay.
want me to re-forward over that email?
No, not if it's public and accessible, then
Okay.
that's easy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Allegretto?
Just very briefly, Mayor, while he's still here, because I hope and would expect that Mr. Trim would not stay for this entire city council meeting, but I just wanted to thank you for what you've done at the golf course over the years. I just, as a matter of fact, played this past Sunday morning. The course was in fantastic condition, and in fact, I played with 3 other guys, and you know, I don't think any one of them necessarily was saying anything to me like, oh, I know you're going to say something in a city council meeting about the condition of the golf course. But they all at one point or another had commented what wonderful condition the greens were in and how great everything looked. And it's always really nice to hear, and the course is really nice to play. The price is still very affordable, and it's a great amenity to our city. Sorry to hear you're retiring, but I'm also happy for you to hear you're retiring. So thank you for everything you've done for our city. Thank you.
Richie Edwards and his crew have done a wonderful job with that. He gets all the credit there, I guarantee. But it's been fun. It's been a great 15 years.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Berry?
Yes, I'd like to say thank you for finishing up the safety netting behind Field 2. The neighbors on Martese said thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and we haven't gotten any balls hit into our yard yet. It's still early. Also, I thank you to the library for the Tai Chi class. When the first day that we were there were over 35 people that showed up, and more than half stayed with it. And we just finished our 8 weeks, and we're hoping to have more. So they really, really enjoyed that. And also, pickleball courts are thriving, and they said thank you, thank you, thank you for the bathrooms. I emailed you on that. I think we got the sewer line in, and hopefully by July sometime then we'll have the bathrooms. And I passed on about Ferry Park and pickleball courts there, and the lighting. And they said, well, where's our lighting? I said, one step at a time. Let's get the bathroom in first. And so they're all excited about that, and they appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Jeter?
Nothing yet, sir.
All right. And I'm going to reserve mine for the end of the meeting as well, except do want to thank David Trim for his 15 dedicated years, and I'm going to wish you the very, very best in retirement, sir. Thank you. That'll bring us now to item 8, public comments. This is a time for anyone here who can speak on items not on the agenda, and I'll ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes if that's possible. But if you come forward, just please identify yourself, name and address, and you're free to speak. All right. Seeing none, we're going to go to item 9. Ordinances on first reading. Item 9.1, 2147, ordinance amending Land Development Code, Chapter 1, 2, 5, and 6, food trucks and food truck courts. Ms. Cobb.
This is ordinance 2147, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 1, 2, 5, and 6 of the Land Development Code for food trucks and food truck courts, providing for authority, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. This is first reading.
Yes.
Mr. Frasetti.
Thank you. Chris Rossetti, Growth Management Director. So this is an item updating some language within the Land Development Code. I'm sure as you're all familiar with, every few months it seems like we're bringing some type of LDC amendment here, trying to keep up with kind of changing trends, outdated language within the code, and so on. This is one of those changes related to food trucks and food truck courts. So about 5 years ago, we put some updates into the code related to food trucks, and we had previously had some language already in there regarding mobile vending, mobile food vehicles, things like that. And so about 5 years ago, there were some changes made to kind of clarify and explain that process a little better than it was. A couple years later, the state changed the state statute regarding mobile food vehicles, and really made a lot of our code language outdated. In addition to that, I think as a result of that newer statute, you've seen a big growth in that area of food trucks, food truck courts, expanding all throughout this area, throughout the county, and throughout the state really. So what we've put together here is to amend chapters 1, 2, 5, and 6, really just anywhere that there was mention of food trucks and food truck courts that had to be addressed for this change. And what it really does is clarifies the language in these sections in some of those changes there that I did discuss. So the statute, if it is a self-contained food truck, meaning fully self-contained, not connected to any utilities, electrical, sewer, you name it, if it's a fully self-contained food truck, it's can't really be limited and regulated by the city. They can operate and exist where they so choose. So if it's stationary, or is what we have in the code the term now, if it's connecting to any utilities, that's where it has to come in and meet any code requirements we may have. But what we've seen is some of these food truck courts popping up that are kind of haphazard, makeshift areas of all sorts of stuff and no dedicated parking or standards across it. That was really the goal of this ordinance, was to clean up the language to make it meet statute, but then also address the food truck courts so that they don't look, so sporadic in nature and not following any standards. And so what we proposed here is to clarify the language and add in a food truck court criteria and clarify the stationary food truck language that basically if a food truck court's coming in, it's permitted as a food truck court. There's parking standards, there's some setback and distance standards between those food trucks or food dispensing vehicles. There's signage limitations so that there's not a million signs popped up everywhere, that the food truck court can have one main sign and each vehicle that typically has some type of wrapper signage on it serves as a sign for that vehicle. And so what we did, we looked at various ordinances around the state and even some other states when it came to the food trucks and food truck courts, and we've incorporated that language into this proposed change. This did go to the LPA at their last meeting, and they did recommend one very minor change. There's 2 locations within the ordinance that we have language saying that a food truck or the stationary food truck must be placed on a stabilized surface. In parentheses next to that word stabilized surface, we had i.e. concrete or asphalt, really just trying to give an example of what a stabilized surface means to help give an example. The LPA actually wanted that section in parentheses, the i.e. concrete or asphalt removed. They just didn't think it should be there. So that was the one change they did recommend, but aside from that, they did recommend to approve this ordinance. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend the adoption of ordinance 2147, amending the Land Development Code to update and add requirements for stationary food trucks and food truck courts.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council for Mr. Frasetti? Mr. Schmidt.
I appreciate you bringing up, like you said, occasionally some changes to the LDC, keeping up with trends, keeping up with statutory requirements. Are we meeting with some food truck folks that may be interested in doing more of this? Or is this just some things that we've learned off of experience? Where is this change in the LDC coming from?
Sure. I'd say mostly learned through our experience dealing with them. We have spoken to a lot of them, all the stationary food trucks, any of the ones that are attached to utilities and somewhat permanent in the city, have come through our office for permitting from PCR. So we've talked to them. And then we run some issues on the code enforcement side too, trying to, see how to clean up some of these. And right now, there's not really any requirements or any language in there to hold them to. So mostly on kind of the learned experience process, more so I'd say.
Mr. Mayor, if I can follow up. Were any other vendors, like the food truck vendors, a part of this, or any discussion with that industry? Is it building this, or?
We did not hold any public meetings with them or group meetings with them for this one specifically.
Have you heard of any concerns from them or anything about this?
We have not.
Okay, no, that's just the first reading. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith?
Couple questions real quick. I see in the food truck court, there's 3 per food truck parking space requirements. I'm assuming that if you're in the downtown overlay district, that is null and void because there are no parking lot or parking requirements down there, correct?
Correct. If there's sufficient parking within the block, I think is the language for downtown. So with that, yes, that would take
Okay.
precedent.
And then the other question I had, so is there a grandfather clause in here?
Yes. So existing ones wouldn't have to change for this. They would be.
Is that forever or for a period of time?
Right now, it would be forever. Basically, they'd be considering an existing nonconformity, so they could continue to exist as is. If we want to put in a time frame for compliance, we could. But what we did, it would just be treated as a nonconformity if this was approved.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on this one. This is, impacting small businesses. And we've got both the operator, which this is aimed at mostly. We've got the operator. He brings in 1 truck versus 2 makes him a food court, right? So I spent a lot of time looking at this, and with the state preempting, they took it away from the cities, right, regulating mobile food trucks.
Yes.
And so I've seen the leap here, there's a leap, and it's that are not self-contained, and then I heard you say, well, when they're connected to utilities. It's bringing 2 things together that I'm not sure, are supposed to be, but for convenience. So if I have a food truck, and it has a generator in it, has gas in it, has water in it, is it mobile or stationary?
That's mobile.
I'm sorry?
Mobile.
So you're saying that when they also have that same food truck has the ability with a water hose and or an electric plug-in, plugs into something that's there on site, it becomes stationary?
Yes.
So that's the stretch. That's the leap that had to be made to get you back into the regulation of these small businesses. That's a stretch. Would you agree or say that's?
I don't believe it's a stretch. It's defined in statute, where that line stops. And so that's where, we already had the language prior to that statute change for stationary food trucks. We were just trying to really clarify it here.
So stationary, that's just,
That's a term that the city, gave them.
Right, so stationary, it just blows my mind that you're suggesting that I believe, that we believe, that stationary means that the same vehicle that's setting their own wheels, that is self-contained, which then preempts you and leaves it with the state, that once it connects a water hose and an extension cord to something else, it becomes stationary. I'm not buying it. And I won't be supporting staff's recommendation to, there are some things in here that are probably pretty good, but that's my big hang up right there. Also, it's funny, I just, I know the LPA mentioned that they wanted some clarification, and I always find it a little bit amusing that sometimes the more they try to clarify, the more confusing it gets. But when it said concrete pad, I go camping and I know what a concrete pad, and it said a supporting device. So whether it's concrete or plastic, I'll put down little pads on the ground and it becomes stable at that point. Most of them have that, but are we talking about pouring a 20 by 20 concrete pad? Because that's an increased expense on the operator, which of course we know he or she needs to pass on to the food truck small business owner themselves. And I guess while I'm talking about it and so upset about it, Councilman Schmidt asked the question. I've spoken to the
2 food truck owners in town just yesterday and today, and neither of them have heard from you that this was going to be on the agenda. I mean, you know those business owners, right?
Not personally, but I mean, like I did say, we have had interactions, you know, my staff has over time, whether it's for permitting, BTRs, et cetera.
Tom Tona.
Okay.
Do you know Mr. Tona?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know Mr. Larimer?
No.
Okay, Mr. Larimer's he's here in the audience. He hadn't heard anything about it, so when I was thinking, well, man, these are the 2 big guys that are in town, and then I'm like, well, if they're mobile, where are all the stationaries? But what's happened here is by redefining or defining what stationary is, that little connection then makes every one of their little food trucks on their property become stationary and then thus regulated by the city, which the state took away.
Sure, and just to clarify, that was already defined as far back as 2019. So we're not changing that definition.
Well, I printed it out because I figured I kind of tried to guess, what are they talking about stationary? I don't know of any stationary food trucks in the community, so I had to figure out where you were going with it. So I did go pull out the 509-102, which you reference here, and it's the same leap. They say self-contained. They don't say, they have the opportunity to say self-contained and not able to connect to utilities. Gas is in the vehicle or in the thing, its own wheels. It's got its own generator, it's got its own gas, and it's got its own water. And to suggest that just by plugging it in becomes stationary, I'm out on supporting what you've put forward. So thank you.
Other comments from council? Mr. Mead.
So I know we have some folks here today, and I haven't seen Mr. Tona, but this would not affect the existing operators, would it?
No, it would not. It would not. There would be non-conformities, you know, if it was approved, but they wouldn't be, you know, required to be brought to compliance.
Any other comments from council? Anyone from the audience wish to speak on this?
Mr. Mayor, I have a follow-up. That's a good question. Thank you, Mr. Mead. So this non-conformity that apparently would go on for these guys, but the new guys or ladies, business owners, operators, the same definition that you've tried to apply here, that it becomes stationary, even if it's self-contained, once it connects to a water hose or to an extension cord, it becomes defined by you as stationary.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments from council? Council, may we get a motion?
Sorry.
I did ask public, nobody from the public wishes to speak.
I didn't hear but that's what I was thinking. I couldn't remember if it came after the motion and then public, or is it public is now?
Public now.
I missed it.
Public now, and no one came forward, so I jumped to asking for a motion. And may we get a motion? All right, then this will fail for lack of a motion if we don't get a motion. All right, we'll go to item 9.2. 2148, ordinance amending land development code chapters 1 and 2 for manufacturing uses. Ms. Cox.
Okay, this is ordinance 2148, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending chapters 1 and 2 of the land development code for manufacturing uses, providing for authority, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. So this is a topic so manufacturing currently we had defined as intense type manufacturing and light manufacturing, and so this one came up from a property owner on a situation that we had specifically regarding a use on a property that was a manufacturing use that was in a commercial zone property where manufacturing was not allowed. And when we started learning more about the use, we met with the property owner, we met with the business owner as well on site, learned about the use. We started looking into, is there a way that that type of a medium or light manufacturing could be allowed throughout the city in different zoning districts. Specifically, they were preparing countertops, so they were doing some wood cutting inside a building, enclosed in a building. We had not received any complaints from, it was actually even backing up to a multifamily apartment complex. We had not received any complaints on it, but we did identified it dropping by, seeing that it was a business that had opened without any contact to the city, and so we contacted them and said, hey, what are we doing here? And that's when we found it wasn't allowable use. So really since that time, we've been looking at the code to see if there's some way to allow certain types of manufacturing uses throughout the city that weren't allowed previously. In addition, since that time, we happened, me and one of my staff members were attending a state planning conference and happened to be the keynote speaker, was talking about small scale manufacturing, that there's a lot of these smaller industries that are doing small manufacturing within buildings throughout cities around the country. And so we started doing more research into it and then started trying to see if there were ways to update the code. And even since that time, we've had another business come in through our department for permitting and development, and even a CRA grant to do some manufacturing of ice cream within the city, but it was an area that we don't typically have manufacturing. So we've been trying to work with them, work with a couple of business owners, and so what we've done here is we've provided a land development code update that would split out the definitions for manufacturing into light, medium, and heavy. Instead of just having two, we would have 3 manufacturing definitions, and then from there we added to our table of uses to really spell out what those different types of manufacturing uses are and what zoning districts they would be allowed, so that we could allow the light manufacturing within our mixed use and commercial areas, the medium manufacturing within our CG, and then the heavy just within our CTP and MB, all of them being allowed within the CTP and MB. That way, like I said, there's a lot of changing industries that we're seeing pop up that we really don't feel would have any negative impact to surrounding properties and to the city, and thought it would be a good way to allow some of those uses. This item does also require a comprehensive plan amendment, which is one of the future items on the agenda to be discussed. So not too much of this item as far as actual code changes, but really it's like trying to expand our definition for manufacturing. This did go to the LPA at their last meeting, and they did recommend approval of this ordinance. So with that, I do recommend approval of this ordinance. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Any questions from council on 2148? Mr. Smith?
This brings up something interesting that we've talked about before. These conditional use permits we've talked about in the past, wouldn't that be an easy fix for this? Instead of going and changing the whole land development code? Because my concern here is not an ice cream place or the guy cutting tile. My concern is we're breaking it out, so we're going to start allowing a more intense use in a place that we didn't necessarily allow it. And if anything I've learned up here is at some point somebody's going to find the loophole and they're going to jump through it, and then we're going to be slow to react. There may be 3, 4, 5, 6 people that jump through the loophole, and then we're going to close it, and then we got to grandfather them in. So would just maybe going down a conditional use permit be a better route to go than changing the whole comp code and changing all these, classifying these different light, medium, and heavy uses?
It certainly is an option to go. We would still have to put together a process for that to amend the code and go through a conditional use permit process, since we don't have one currently. In our code, we have supplemental standards, which if you meet certain criteria, you're then allowed by right to do things. In this one, we don't have those supplemental standards in here. We're just saying that if you fall into the criteria that you're not providing any outside, basically it's all in, talk here, about the contained within the building, that there's not any exterior impacts to your manufacturing that's allowed. So like an ice cream shop that's manufacturing ice cream, jewelry, studios that are manufacturing jewelry. Those are the light uses that are intended there. We could go down the conditional use permit, but it would also require a pretty large scale rewrite of the land development code to then accomplish that. Then it comes into the process of, we're trying to be fair and consistent with it. So, I do worry some of the situation we get into that, one use is allowed versus the other that's not when we go that.
Well, I guess the question would be, is fair to who? Fair to the adjacent property owner that's been there for 50 years and the property's been used a certain way and now all of a sudden it's being used in a much more intense way that negatively impacts them? I mean, so...
Yeah, to your point, I was going to say, the way we would ensure it's fair is we would put criteria in the code for the council to look at and determine if it's met, and if that use is appropriate under those criteria, then the council could approve it or could approve it with conditions. So I think it would be fair, and I just wanted to clarify, if staff went down that route, I assume the approving body would be the city council, not the LPA. That's what I would recommend if you're going down that route.
So I will say, and we can certainly do that. With that, we're looking at the, intensity. It's intensity. It could be thinking of, noise or other, factors. But we also get intensity, in say manufacturing light for MX zoning, mixed use zoning, or commercial. That's also includes restaurants and uses that have the traffic and that intensity of parking and other noise from bars and restaurants. So I'll say from staff side, we felt that this was consistent with the existing uses in those zoning districts. If we can go down the conditional use permit route, I'll say, and certainly for you guys to decide. I know a common complaint that we receive from the public all the time is the time it takes to go through the process. I do have a concern that if we go down that route, then it's going to have some more pushback as far as it's another step in the process, another slowdown in the process to get to where they want to go.
So this expands the zoning that this stuff is allowed in, but you're saying that you don't believe that anything that you have designated in each category is any more intense of a use than is already allowed in those zonings?
Well, we split out the light and the medium intensity so that anything that is manufacturing that goes into the outdoor is only allowed in commercial, which already allows car washes and bars, restaurants, things that produce noise and other impacts. The light, which goes into the mixed use zoning, it has to be contained within the building, so it can't go outside the walls. So that's where we're trying to hold it back in. The heavy industrial is only commerce and technology park in our mixed business. We're allowed to currently, the medium talks about that it can't provide any negative impacts to adjacent land uses. That would be allowed in commercial, but we felt when we were looking at it that there's already bars, restaurants, car washes, repair shops, vehicle repair, things like that are allowed in commercial, and that a medium manufacturing is a similar intensity to those uses. Potential on the noise side or vibration side, potentially less on parking. Most of these uses are going to have a much greater, a much less intense parking need, traffic need when we're looking at traffic plans that are submitted during development orders, things like that. So definitely a lot of ways we can look at it here.
Mr. Mead.
I'm dealing with a similar issue with a client in the county where block property had the current zoning, current land use, all the entitlements following the rules in place. And what's scary is I'm going to acquire this property. If I buy this is the zoning, this is the land use, and this is exactly what I could do with it. If we go on a ad hoc conditional use basis, my fear is that the wheels of business start slowing down. One must put a piece of property under contract and then start the, no offense, but sometimes slower speed of government into place to find out if they can get approved from a city council a conditional use of making ice cream. I'm not being facetious, this is next to my office, of making ice cream at this address, and then if a elected body says that we want them to make ice cream on Walter Martin Road 6.5 months later, then they continue on with their business model. I don't think they would do business in the city of Fort Walton. What I like is a set of rules and procedures in place where when they go to put that property under contract, within 30 days, they can say, okay, this is allowed, this is not allowed, maybe go down and meet with city staff. Does this mean what it says? Yes. Okay, we're gonna move forward and buy it after a survey and the other things. So I guess my fear is, Mr. Smith, that if we do these on an ad hoc type basis, if that's what you're suggesting, that perhaps it might slow down or not give enough predictability to buyers or whatnot of real property. So that's why I'd be in support of a rule-based system. I'm not sure if everyone's on board with it. I'm hoping that you've had some meetings and had some consensus, but that's what I'd like to see.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Barry.
Okay, I'm not in favor of this, and I'll tell you why. My neighborhood is zone R1. It has been completely taken away from us. We now have Airbnbs there, and not long ago, the city approved that they could have a business at the houses as long as they kept their business on their property and not out on the street. Other neighborhoods that are zone R1, the food trucks that have to have their machinery going all day and all night, like such as ice cream makers or whatever, is going all day and all night, and especially during like the springtime, whenever the windows are open and people are trying to sleep, all day and all night, it's right out there. So our R1, our zoning has been taken away from us. So I'm not in favor of expanding on this.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
Mr. Pursetti, can you answer what Mr. Berry said as if it were a question?
So this proposal wouldn't go into residential zoning R1, R2. It wouldn't impact the zoning districts. This would be limited to mixed use and commercial for the light manufacturing. Heavy would only be allowed in commercial or the more intense uses.
And so what you're really trying to do, as I understand this, is before we only had heavy manufacturing and medium manufacturing. That was it. So if I wanted to make ice cream, I had to go into a medium manufacturing, a district that was zoned for where I could do medium manufacturing. Okay, now I can do light manufacturing if this passes in a different area, but still an area zoned for business, correct?
Correct.
So I'm not manufacturing ice cream at my house.
Correct. Currently, the way the code is, it has either that intense heavy manufacturing or what's considered light manufacturing, and that's limited to mixed business and CTP, which are really only very small areas. Mixed business is along North Hollywood Boulevard in some areas around Hollywood, and CTP is on like our Commerce and Technology Park. So any type of manufacturing currently is only allowed in those areas. That's where we're running into a few situations in the last few months here that people are coming in with some manufacturing uses that we were like, well, it's going to fall into light manufacturing, have to be an MB, and we were telling people, no, sorry, you're not allowed to operate in commercial zone districts in those cases. So we were just trying to look for an avenue to really allow. I said we coincidentally happened to be at a conference that was talking about that topic of small scale manufacturing that's moving into the city's downtowns. It could be a candy shop or chocolate shop that's technically manufacturing. That's how it would be classified. But it isn't.
So to this degree, what you're really trying to do here, the goal of this is to make it easier for people to operate a business in the city.
Yes, sir.
With this ordinance.
Mr. Berry.
So let me further clarify. People are doing this in R1 now.
Home-based business requirements are restricted by Florida statute. That if it doesn't change the residential nature of your home, you're allowed to do a home-based business with certain restrictions. But
So we're just talking about where they're supposed to be doing.
and this
now.
wouldn't change that. That can exist today, regardless of what we do in any use or anything in the code. If it doesn't change the residential character and meet the parking standards and few requirements, the state overrides us on that.
Okay, now I'm really confused. We're just talking right here about where they're supposed to having businesses now. MB and mixed. Okay. How about those that are doing it in R1?
If it meets the statute for home-based businesses, they can do it.
So just to clarify, there's
I
a
need
state law.
clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm following you. There's a state law that does not allow the city to prohibit home occupations unless some of the statutory restrictions are violated. So if it loses its residential character and it has employees coming and going and parking all over the place and various things that are laid out in the statute, then we would be able to regulate it. But generally, home occupations are now protected by state law, so we're preempted from regulating them a bit, just like the short-term rentals.
Mr. Walker?
I'll state unequivocally, I love ice cream. So whatever, this is really about the property on Marwalt that is going to be manufacturing ice cream. And currently, are you saying that our current code or categories are gray and that they're not going to allow it?
It is gray there. This came up because of a different business, actually, but then that one just happened to fall kind of on our laps while we were working on this. In that case, because they're also having a retail component, we really sat down with them and did a breakdown of how much of the building, kind of how many square feet are for this use or that use, and what's going to be the primary use of the property to try and work with them to allow that in the code. If something like this was in place, then it would make it a lot easier process for them to come in and operate.
And I guess the big thing is there's nothing in place right now that prohibits the production of ice cream, right? It doesn't say you may not produce ice cream in this zone.
Well, if we were to say that the primary use of the property is light manufacturing, currently it would not be allowed there. Because they're also doing retail, and seating and proceeding, different things. For that one specifically, we went down and we were able to classify it as a retail commercial use. That's allowed. In the other case we have, that was looking at doing some granite preparation with inside a building, fully enclosed, which would fall into that medium manufacturing here. That was the primary use. They were not going to do much in the way of sales. So that's one that we ran into a wall and said that use, for that situation was not allowed. Every situation is a little bit different, and that's why we do have to look at them. But
yeah, because in my mind, if there's something, whether it's granite or ice cream or shoestrings or art or food, if it's made inside the walls and it's not illegal, and it's not a noise ordinance violation, then you get to do it.
Right. And that's where today, just because we did have the manufacturing light assembly, that was the only category we could categorize. So if you were coming in just to make something on a property that wasn't in our business or CTP, we would say that was not allowable.
Yeah, I'm lost in it all because I mean, as far as the ice cream shop goes, they're going to produce ice cream in the back. It's going to be inside the building. It's not outside the building. You're going to have noise ordinances that apply.
Absolutely.
And then they have a retail soda bar or ice cream bar up front. And there's parking requirements for that. I mean, if nothing happens tonight on this motion or these changes, will the ice cream shop be able to be there?
That one, yes. The other business that I referenced, no.
I don't know. Well, I'm trusting that you made a good decision based on the existing codes.
I'll say yes. I mean, I believe so. What we try to do, we have a table of uses, and first, typically it starts with my planning team, my planners. They look at it, see where it can fit within that table. If it falls into that, gray area, tougher area to interpret, that's when they meet with me and we go through. Our goal, our plan is to try and fit it within the box. If it meets code, we try to find a way to get it to fit in that box. The only time that we're going to say nope, it's not allowed there. You can't do it there is when we look through it and there's just no way that it's allowed. Our first goal always is to make it fit within the box if we can. And that's what we did with the ice cream shop specifically. We looked through all the different uses. Okay, yeah, we can have these uses. This is allowed here. This is allowed here. Okay, manufacturing isn't, but if that's a certain percentage smaller area of the property, then we can make that the accessory use, and that's okay. And that's where we work through.
Rod, I was reading here about the artisan studios or cottage industries. Those get into some more defining gray areas, like, well, no, this is cottage, and it's like, well, you're shipping it out of state,
Exactly,
therefore, no,
yes.
it's not cottage, and,
Yeah.
you know, but if I make shoestrings, that's the only thing I can think of. If I manufacture shoestrings at a place, you can do that, but you
Yes.
can't do the other thing that you didn't approve.
Right, and that's where we go in and say, we look at the table of uses. We also reference, the American Planning Association has the planning dictionary, so we, a lot of times we'll go back to the actual planning dictionary definition for these words to figure out, you know, can we fit it one way versus the other, and that's, you know, it's always trying to you know, understand the request and then see if we can fit it within the existing code. So this is the topic that just kind of popped up here and said, you know, this might be a way to further clarify it because we've either got light or heavy. There's nothing in between. It's all or nothing kind of situation at the current.
Well, I definitely want to encourage businesses to, you know, operate in the city and elsewhere. And if our current code that you applied stopped a business from buying a building, leasing a building, starting a business in it or whatever, I'd like to learn more about the business. And I don't know if that's I don't know if that's the conditional land use. I don't know if that's, you know, you have to apply it to everyone. I forget what that's called, but I get it. But I count on that you made a good decision that they can't produce that right there. And that if that business owner is upset on the decision that you made, we would hear from them. I've not heard from them. I don't know if anyone else has.
We've continued working with them, I'd say for quite a few months now, you know, even you know, through this code development process to try and get to something that would work for those types of situations, you know, as well as any others that may pop up in the future.
Mr. Smith?
So let me tell you where I'm having a little heartburn and see if I can get you to help me out here. So light manufacturing, according to this, will be able to go into mixed use zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you look at our future land use map, it almost makes half the city mixed use, which is in the middle of some neighborhoods. I got a guy that wants to come in, he wants to make some ice cream, can make it indoors, great. Wants to sell it at the front of the store, great. Then decides, oh, I'm gonna be a national distributor, so I'm gonna have tractor trailers coming in and out while I'm in the middle of a neighborhood producing ice cream. So tell me how, that's kind of my issue here is that then leads into a more intense use than I think we were originally under the understanding of, which now negatively affects the quality of life of the people around them. And I've been seeing a lot of that in my almost 4 years up here. And so I'm being a little cautious and trying to help protect the residents that live there and not have them get run out of their homes that they've been living in for 30, 40, 50 years from new people coming in and doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's makes sense to me to explain it that way. That's perfect. I think there's two ways we could probably address that in an ordinance or this ordinance. One, that makes use of the future land use. They said does cover all the city. Currently, we do have it allowed in MX1 and MX2. MX1 does allow the single-family homes on up to condos and things like that. One option, we could just not allow any type of manufacturing in MX1. That's going to cut out a significant portion of the properties that are zoned mixed use in the city. When you look at MX1, that's a lot of areas. Those are transitional areas. So when you look at around Hospital Drive, for example, by the health department, those areas around Vine, Hospital are MX1 zoned because you're going from single family R1 zone properties to more intense properties. So our MX1 is kind of that transitional zone we have. So we also see in some areas off of Beale Parkway, that you're going from commercial or MX2 zoned to single family residential. We have MX1 as that kind of in-between zoning that allows single family up to commercial uses. Maybe we just take it out of MX1 completely, keep it in MX2 and then commercial uses, and MX2 and commercial zoned areas have buffers to residential uses typically, not counting condos and those high intensity residential units. Or we had supplemental standards in place, like we do in Chapter 5 for a lot of other uses. I think we have about 30 other supplemental standards, and we could develop, we'd have to come back and develop those to put in specific language regarding parking, traffic, other things. We could absolutely develop that to restrict it that way, or maybe just cut back on a little bit of zoning allowable, zoning on. those residential, because that's, I understand what you're saying there with the single family, and that's where MX1 would come into play. MX2 doesn't allow single family, it does allow apartments and condos, but also again, the map area there, it's, I said, MX1 is really that transition between single family to something more intense.
Mr. Walker?
You done, Travis?
Yes.
So, that's, I see the shed in the back at someone's house, and they're manufacturing art, and they're producing art, and they're selling it online, and it's going to California or Colorado or whatever else. And so it just seems oftentimes, and I know you have to fight it, struggle with it, or understand it, or whatever else. We go to fix a problem and we create 4 more. And it's like, well, we've created a violator over there. Now she's moved into her, she didn't, I wouldn't know to think if I was producing art in my back shed back there until Gladys, the next door neighbor, gets upset at me and sees that I'm doing it, and then finds my website, and then she complains to you, and we've created a violator out of, this artist who's selling her stuff out of the shed. So it's tough business of this, restricting and noise ordinances are really big, I think, have to be just so big in solving problems. Me producing, manufacturing art in my shed should not be prohibited, ever. I don't know how, just can't ever see it, but we're gonna prohibit that type of manufacturing. So that's where I just come back to the noise ordinance. Or maybe commercial traffic, I don't know. If you're having, someone pulls up, parks in your driveway and goes around back and gets their art and then leaves with it, was that a prohibited practice? Well, we're in a neighborhood. I was like, well, yeah, that's where she produces her art. And so I don't want to restrict her or make her have to, come in and don't tell anybody that I'm doing this, because this may be a violation. I don't want to create violators by, good, well-intentioned changes, updates, and we're going to try to accommodate this one business or issue that we're having, and it turns out we create a problem for others. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not clear enough tonight on what this is actually going to accomplish. So I would have trouble voting yes. Let's just say that.
Mr. Meany. So the ice cream shop. It's a good example because we need why are we here? We're not here talking about Martisa or any other residential property. If that ice cream shop, Bibby's, shut down the road, one would assume, I shouldn't make assumptions. Okay, let's say that this ice cream shop, when Walter Martin does not do enough business, retail business, and they decide that it's not worth staffing the retail side of their store, then they become solely manufacturing to send to other locations in Destin and Navarre and their other facilities. Then they would move into a non-compliant situation.
Yes.
So we would have a business that came to town. They seem to be spending a lot of money making the street look better, in my opinion. And then we would then start assessing code violations and fines on them on a daily basis. And they would come before us and say, we're losing if this happened. So that's kind of my concern, is having a rubric that we could follow. That would be the case, wouldn't it, if they stopped selling out of them?
Yes, or if that same business came in but had no intention of doing a retail component from the get-go, the answer would just be no, you can't do that there.
But could they do retail and that at the same time and be compliant?
Yes.
Mayor,
It's easy to
can I ask one as well? So currently MX1, is it allowed or is it not? Grocery store.
It doesn't allow a grocery store?
Is a grocery store allowed with an MX1?
Yes.
Alcohol sales package store? Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Health club?
yes.
Okay. So hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Those places all have a lot of traffic and a lot of deliveries and a lot of in and out people on those properties all the time. those places are all in very big buildings, at least most of them, maybe not the alcohol package store, just kind of threw that in for the shock value. But, you know, if you think about a grocery store and you think about the semi truck coming to and fro and dropping stuff off, I mean, they're getting multiple, sometimes dozens of deliveries a day of products to their store. That business can only be in a large store like that. Like if somebody's homemade Taylor Swift friendship bracelet business takes off so much that now semi trucks are coming to a small building, like they're gonna move to a bigger building. It's just the way it is. I only see this as a way to make it easier for not only our city staff to regulate what businesses allow, but mainly to allow what businesses want to operate in these other places that they've not traditionally been allowed to operate in. It makes the rules clear for everybody, it makes the rules fair for everyone. If I wanted to operate my own small, light manufacturing thing that falls within all of these set guidelines in this particular location, then I can do that. Now, if there are problems that violate noise ordinances or any other number of regulations that we have as a city, then they would certainly be addressed with fines and citations and things of that nature. But I just see this as a positive thing that I think that we're trying to, I like that we're talking it out and trying to think about what potential things could possibly trip us up here that we've not thought about. But you know, this is also on first reading, so we will get another opportunity with this. We would get feedback from the public potentially as well to hear if people have a problem with this or didn't like this, etc. So I just think this is something that would be a good thing, and I would be for making a motion to move it along as soon as our questions are completed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Councilman Meade, I appreciate that because that triggered something that was, and you confirmed it, that ice cream shop. It's going to be allowed because there is a component of manufacturing and retail. And as the example he used, if retail goes away, they're out of compliance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, you know, back to the artist, they're in the back manufacturing art that's being shipped around the world, but they also have a retail art studio up front. And it becomes too expensive to staff. And they're just doing so well online, it just, you know, it just feels wrong that they would become out of compliance because they made a good business decision to shut down their retail up front, and now they're only doing what they were allowed to do in part, and there's no noise violation, there's no traffic violation, so it's like, what are we doing? I mean, again, I know it's well intentioned, and it's like, it makes sense now, but then it doesn't later, and we're like, oh man, I created 3 other problems by, well, now they're having to leave, that business is having to leave because they're not going to face the daily fines, that artist is not going to face the daily fines, I'm out of here, so it's like, well, we ran you out of here. Or would we accommodate them and come back and maybe make that, I've never heard that, what's it called, special use? Conditional use or whatever. Maybe, I mean, we want to accommodate businesses, I know that, but sometimes I feel just all this upfront stuff is just, it sounds good now, but it's going to create a problem somewhere else later that we just haven't seen yet. So that's primarily my reason for leaving things as they are until a good case, to me at least, of understanding, of clear and, oh, yeah, there it is. But it seems to be broad, and when you open up a land development code, I get concerned as well that other things are out of sight, out of mind, that are also being adjusted and adapted that we might not even be talking about up here today. So again, I'll remain opposed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other comments from council? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this subject? Yes, ma'am.
Sharon Trinnery, 42 Bay Drive. I want to reiterate what Payne is saying, that until there's a specific situation, it just seems to me like the planning and zoning is just more interested in giving us more and more regulations. And it's becoming overwhelming, I think. And when I talk to the public, they're getting very upset because there's constantly changes and there's constant regulations. And so just to reinforce what Payne is saying, I think it's wrong to keep giving us more and more regulations.
Okay. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this one?
Good evening. My name is Ken Metcalf. I'm the Director of Planning with Stern Weaver, Tallahassee, 106 East College Avenue. I'm here on behalf of Regency Inn of Sandestin. They are the property owner that leases to Northwest Countertops. And that's the company that started doing the granite cutting. And just to follow up on the comment that I think was made that, gee, you would think if the operation were occurring within the structure, there shouldn't be a problem. But there was, because just the technical definition of manufacturing didn't allow them to cut the granite because they were transforming the granite ultimately into a countertop. So this becomes a definitional issue. I do a lot of zoning work as well, and I think your staff has done a very good job with these definitions. We didn't come to you, sir, Commissioner, Councilman Walker, or any of the other councilmen to talk about the code enforcement concern, because we thought a better approach was to work with staff and try to see if we can come up with regulatory standards that make sense, that would allow the use, make sure it's compatible. My particular client has gone through a lot of expense. Now granted, they did that up front before they understood that they couldn't do this operation. They did get a business tax receipt to be able to sell the granite, and they just didn't realize they couldn't cut the granite there. And so they've invested a lot of money in high technology to keep it quiet. And as you've heard, there have been no complaints and it's been going on for quite a while. So we're looking for a solution. I appreciate the comment that sometimes there's too much regulation, but it's regulation that has precluded them from being able to do an operation that seems to be highly compatible with the adjacent properties. And I think the proof is sort of in the pudding that there haven't been any complaints for the whole time that they've been operating. So we're flexible in terms of trying to work out an approach that would work and that everyone could get comfortable with. This is first reading. I would hope maybe we could just, if the council could find a way to support this just this evening for first reading, I'd be happy to come back and discuss that particular manufacturer's operation in more detail if you would like. I can go into it this evening if you would like, but my feeling is that the difficulty, the challenge that you have, and this is true of any zoning code, is you have definitions, and those definitions try to classify uses, and it's very common to do exactly what your professional staff has recommended, to have light, medium, and heavy intensity uses, because you just don't want to, you don't want a one-size-fits-all, because that penalizes the business community that's really just trying to do a light or a medium intensity use, and they're not able to, even though staff believes that it's just as compatible as other uses that are already allowed in the zoning district. So I think this is sort of your classic situation where we have a definitional concern that we're trying to resolve, and perhaps if a conditional use review process is the preferred approach, I mean, I'm sure our client could live with that, and I think we could demonstrate through conditional use criteria that it's compatible. I can tell you I do a lot of conditional use projects around the state. They can be challenging because you adopt a set of criteria in the governing body that has to review the applications. may have to go through 10 criteria. And what we find is that sometimes there are third-party challenges because the criteria can be difficult to apply in a consistent way. So we end up, unfortunately, involved in litigation cases where neighbors have challenged, we've had to litigate those, and usually they're approved, and it just, all that's happened is you've added 6 months of court time and a lot of expense only to get that business person to where they were trying to get to at the very beginning. And so communities sort of have two options. You can go that route, or you can try to set up criteria in your code that would be allowed, where the use would be allowed as of right rather than going through conditional use review in order to ensure that those uses are compatible. And I think your staff has done that with these definitions. I think they make sense to me. In the case of this particular use, they can certainly operate it in a compatible manner. So I would just ask if it's the will of the majority that the council support, at least for first reading, I'd be happy to come back and discuss this particular use in more detail if that's your desire. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
I do
Yes.
have some question for you. So, I'm on board with you. I actually want to make it easier. I want to remove obstacles. I want to remove language that causes it. You say, and when Chris has a second, I'm going to ask him, but you say there were no complaints. How were you cited? How were the tenants cited or informed that they're out of compliance?
Actually, and I'll let staff respond to that. My understanding, I wasn't there, but
Sure.
I met with staff after they had been advised that they couldn't do the cutting, and they voluntarily stopped doing the cutting to try to straighten everything out. But I think actually what occurred is that they were displaying some of the granite slabs. Staff came by and said, you can't display those slabs out in the front like that. And they said, oh, okay, we didn't realize. And so in the course of their staff going to the site, they realized that they were cutting because they went into the building. That's my understanding.
Okay, we'll wait on Mr. Frazzetti. I do have some questions for him. Mr. Frazzetti, and sir, if you don't mind, just staying up there because I might come right back to you. I'm not sure, or I may call you back up. Mr. Frazzetti, so I asked him if there were any complaints from anyone, how it became a violation. How would you describe that?
No, we didn't receive any complaints. It was actually me and my staff that saw the business there. As Rick said, there was a BTR issued in the BTR application. We thought it was a retail store that we were issuing to, and then I'll say myself personally and my staff were driving, just driving down 98 here, and saw big slabs of granite out here, and so we contacted them and said, hey, what are you guys doing? And that's when we learned that they had the info, so they were cutting and finishing the stone in the building. But so it was fully staff initiated through me and my code enforcement team.
So the problem twofold was the granite was outside. Is this there by Arby's?
No, this is down towards Ray Parkway.
Okay, so they had some out. Is it still okay to have granite out front?
Not out front.
Okay, so
Yes.
so retail has to be inside, and then if the cutting of granite, which he mentioned, if it was silent, it was done with water, it was cutting the granite, it's not allowed.
Correct. Currently it's not allowed.
And that's the problem that I have.
And that's where we started working with the owners and Mr. McCaff and trying to come to something in the code that would open up.
I mean, it just seems so ludicrous, excuse me, nothing personally against you, it seems ludicrous that we're here about a problem that's not a problem, other than the language. The language says you can't cut. It's like, well, if it's quiet, no, you just can't cut. And that just seems business prohibitive. So anyway, there was not a complaint from the community. You guys drove by, decided they were cutting, and that was not something that was allowed. And here we are, all of our time, your time, his client's time, the customer's time over the words. So it just bothers me tremendously.
And that's why we're trying to, really put some changes in place to open up the code here to allow those uses. I'll say another option. I think we discussed, initially back with them too, that is afforded to anybody. Is always a variance. Someone can always request a variance. Go through that process for any variation to the land development code. So, as the one-offs, if someone, if in that case, we cited them, said it's not allowable use, they could request a variance and say, hey, we want to allow our specific activity on a site. They could go through that if they wish. I don't recall how far, if any, that road was explored by them. But in this case, we said, well, this might be something that it's not, maybe instead of requiring someone to, go through the process for a variance, this is a code issue versus a use issue. So that's why we went through this effort and time to update the code so that, it doesn't, one person goes for a variance and then the next thing you know, someone else is looking for some other light manufacturing that's not allowed, and then we said, well, you can go through a variance and pay the fees and go through that process. Maybe if we just fix the code, allow those uses in these places because they're not receiving, we're not receiving any complaints from anybody, it's not negatively impacting adjacent properties. If we can loosen that restriction that exists there currently, maybe it would be the best way forward.
Yeah, legal business conducting business that's not causing anyone any problems. It just bothers me that staff's time's being taken up to stop by and say, well, you're cutting something and therefore it's a violation. Let's go to, and then that he has to be here. Where did you come here from, sir?
Tallahassee.
From Tallahassee, and your client is from where?
He lives right.
Oh, you're representing him here, so it seems like a lot of work for something that wasn't really a problem.
Oh, I absolutely understand. I mean, that's, unfortunately the probably less fun side of what we do between, planning, zoning, land development, regulation, and code enforcement. That's what we do.
Other questions or comments from council? Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this?
But I would just ask Chris for one thing, just for the record, because I just want council to be clear on what they're voting on. Can you just quickly tell them, not just the light manufacturing, but you're making other changes to the code for zoning districts for heavy and medium as well. So can we just give them a really quick summary, because I want it to be clear for the record.
Absolutely, yes. So in here, as I mentioned, we had previously manufacturing light and manufacturing heavy. What we're proposing in here is under the manufacturing heavy, shortening the description and the table of uses to just manufacturing heavy, and also allowing it in our mixed business. Currently, any type of heavy manufacturing is only allowed in CTP, and we've also run into, I can't say a specific situation, but we've run into issues over the years that mixed business, people want to open a business which has areas on Industrial Drive, or Hollywood, some of the streets back there, and they're not allowed. So we are proposing to allow the heavy in CTP and mixed business. And then the medium manufacturing that we are creating a definition for, we have listed that as an allowable use in commercial, commerce and technology park, and business as well. And then the manufacturing light assembly, we're just shortening that description and table of uses to manufacturing light. And we are allowing that in the MX1, MX2, CG, CTP, and mixed business, which are mixed use, commercial, and those manufacturing zoning districts.
Just back to, I don't know why my mind's on art tonight, but there's a retail up front, but they also manufacture. I get art framed, and they go back there and they manufacture the frames. And so it's just blowing my mind that the simple cutting of something, whether it be a piece of frame or a piece of granite, is somehow prohibited based on words. I mean, in the code, where is it says, the difference between cutting a wooden frame, a frame is okay, but granite is not.
That's where we go back into the definitions that we have. Will cartable uses, if we have a definition in our land development code chapter 1, we'll go back to that. If not, then we typically will reference the APA planner dictionary to evaluate their definitions and see which one it most fits into determine whether it's actually manufacturing, whether, it's an artisan studio, there's something else there, or, that's what myself and my team is tasked with trying to determine which those are. In this situation, that's where we work with Mr. Metcalf and his clients to, see, we understand where they're coming from, and, how can we try to fit that within some box in the code. And, one thing Mr. McCaff also just briefly touched on was our code being by right. The code, the way the current development code structured, has been for about 12 years, is that if you fit within the box, if you check the boxes, if you meet the code, you're allowed to do it. You can go forward and do. If you don't, then you need to figure out a new plan, look elsewhere, or go through a variance request. Typically, currently, to allow that, get that use allowed, or
You say it's in similar shapes. What are some other businesses next door to him or to your client? Any stores there that you can name? Is it in a strip mall?
No, it's a standalone.
Standalone?
Building.
Oh, okay. So what are the neighbors? What are the two immediate neighbors?
It's the
neighborship?
So yeah, it's the hotel on the one side, the Regency Inn, and then I believe actually the church property to the west. To the north are apartments.
Just that whole manufacturing and therefore a cut makes it manufacturing. It is, I don't know. And sir, if what we need to do tonight is, vote affirmatively on this, if I need to vote affirmatively on this so that we can get to a second reading, so that we can clarify the language, I'd like to gut it myself. I'd like to gut all this. I'd like for us to have the ability tonight to say, I make a motion that we relieve him of the obstruction that has been brought upon him by the city stopping him from cutting, letting his client get back to cutting while we do our job up here figuring out how to, fix words. His client has been, how long have they not been doing cutting their business? How long have they not been cutting?
They have not been stopped. We have not stopped them from operating. So
Okay.
we're working through this process.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
So what this does is, if you were to open up a frame shop and it'd be a very quiet cut, you could do it with this allowable use.
Yes.
And what we're hearing from Mr. Metcalf is with this proposed change, it will allow him to continue to cut.
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, if there's no further questions, can I please make a motion?
We had someone from the public still wants to speak, and then we can.
I thought we already closed.
Well, we did, but she wanted to speak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm with Mr. Walker on this. It seems like, and no offense to Mr. Crescetti, but it seems like he's got an awful lot of power. And the question was there any complaint? And there wasn't a complaint. So they're creating, the planning and zoning department, it seems to me, is creating problems where there shouldn't be any problems until there's an issue. There's not an issue. They were driving by and they decided. To me, that's just wrong. That's just the city taking way too much power away from people, I think. They're just making regulations as they seem fit. And I just don't think that's what the city council and what Fort Walton Beach specifically wants out of their governing officials.
Mr. Allegretto.
Mayor, I move for adoption of ordinance 2148 to amend the Land Development Code, chapters 1 and 2, to amend definitions of manufacturing and update allowed zoning districts based on the intensity of the manufacturing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Allegretto and seconded by Councilman Meade to approve 2148, an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, chapters 1 and 2 for manufacturing uses. Further comment?
Just briefly, Mayor, because we've certainly talked about this one quite a bit, and I think it definitely deserved a quality discussion for sure, but I want to make certain that it's understood that what this motion does is make it easier to do business in the city, as this gentleman has driven a long way tonight to point out. There was a problem The code was enforced. We have a code in the city. And the code is supposed to be enforced by our code enforcement department. That's what they're supposed to do. You drive by and see a illegal pontoon boat operation in someone's backyard, I want the code enforcement officers to go enforce the code. Whatever the code violation is, we're meant to enforce the code. The more egregious the violation of the code, obviously, the more important it is. That's not to say that any code violation is not important. So they enforced a code. Now they're here before us, the governing body, to say, hey, maybe this code doesn't make all the sense in the world. Maybe we can make it a lot easier on this specific business and others like it to do business within the city limits. I think that's an important thing that we do here in the city of Fort Walton Beach.
That wasn't what
Ma'am,
I thought.
ma'am,
Okay,
I'm speaking.
sorry.
That's what we're doing here tonight, is making it easier for this gentleman's client
Code was violated.
to do business in the city of Fort Walton Beach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, I lost my train of thought, but I'm good, thank you.
You're good.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Mead?
We operate by rules, and I think we need to have a consistent set of rules that people from the outside can look in the city and see what they can do with real property. So it's for those reasons that I like the concept of further defining this. Look at if they're making pizzas and not selling them at the front desk, is that manufacturing? There's all kind of questions that I have when I read through this, and so I like the idea of expanding and giving more options and more availability. I am open to the concept of between now and the second reading to let's dive into it some more and see if there's any other moving and adjusting that we need to do. Mr. Smith referenced before, but I do like the idea of allowing more business to happen, more businesses to operate. This doesn't seem to me to impact the residential areas, the R1s, the R2s, etc. So I like that. What it appears to me is to allow more business to be conducted in the city without having to go through the process of exemptions, variances, and so on and so forth. Because if you read a variance has a lot of requirements that even if staff supports internally, officially they have to oppose it. So we see those as avenues, yet staff's obligation is to oppose a variance even if they think it's good planning, or even if they think it's good for the city. So we have all these exemptions in place, but they also have their own, side effects. So I like, and I'll support this, and I do like the idea of refining it where it needs to be refined to allow as much business without impact those around it.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from council? Mr. Smith?
All right, yeah, I want to piggyback off what Mr. Mead said. I also want to support this because, my understanding is we heard about this because code enforcement was driving by. There was some cut granite on display out front. And of course, none of us up here want to intrude on your client's day and now your time and effort of being here. But what I appreciate, Mr. Metcalf, what I heard you say is you've been working with staff to help us update the LDC so that it can be easier to do business moving forward, so that your client can continue to stay in the business. Where I understand, whether it's on the other side of the dais or up here, some of the frustration may be there might be other things code enforcement need to prioritize besides that, and there's a good argument in that space, while at the same time we got a staff that we are strongly talking about. We have a workshop next meeting about code enforcement, and this is something inside the LDC that we're looking at broadening and expanding so that we can find different places for medium, light, and heavy intensity. So I appreciate Mr. Metcalf and what you're doing with our staff, and our staff bringing us these changes so that when you go to enforce something, hopefully our board continues to support that, because I know it's a lot of effort. So thank you.
Mr. Smith?
First off, Chris, I want to tell your staff that I appreciate them doing their job. You guys aren't doing anything more than we've asked you to do. I have been one that has been pounding on you guys on code enforcement. And so to see you guys being proactive, I appreciate. You know, the good thing about that is two things. One, it's going to hopefully curb the people that are trying to, you know, skirt the rules. And then two, it could bring up things like this, an unintended consequence. It looks like we have a business that probably is trying to do the right thing and probably where they're at could probably get away with it and it doesn't cause any issues for anybody, but our code doesn't allow it. So then we need to go look at our code and fix our code. For me, where I'm at on this right now, I'm probably not going to support it, but not because I don't think that there's an issue here. I feel like our residents have been taking a beating here since COVID with the intrusion into their neighborhoods of businesses. And if you go and look at our current land development code and then you go and look at our future land use map, these MX1 zonings expand so far into the neighborhoods now that I just can't in good conscience with the way that it's currently written put what probably is going to be an unintended consequence from the way it's written now into a neighborhood. You know, and I understand that there's plenty of permissible uses that are more intense, but if you go down and look at that list, it's very inconsistent. You can have a grocery store, but you can't have a vehicle storage yard. I mean, it's just kind of all over the place. I don't know if we need to go to a route to maybe what specific issue this has brought up, to maybe change that use to where it's permissible instead of going and changing the whole code. But the code's in place right now. You can do these uses in a property that is zoned for these uses. So it's not like we're being unbusiness friendly by not allowing anything to happen, because you can do it. You just have to find the property that does. But the current way that it's written, my concern is the intrusion into the residential neighborhoods and a couple of other things. But I think that those can be remedied, but I'm just not willing to commit to voting for this right now.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from council?
I'm going to support the motion. It is the first reading. I think we have time to alter those things, but to side with everybody up here, we want to be business friendly, and thank you for doing your job and actually going out there and finding this property and citing it, not waiting on someone to call and complain. So I like it for all those reasons, but I do agree with Councilman Smith. I know where some MX1 and MX2 touches some residential, and it can get a little tricky. So I don't know if we have time to alter it between now and the second reading, or if we will, or how it will be altered. But I'm gonna support the first reading, but I'd be on the fence about supporting the second reading. So hopefully we can make some changes to it.
For sure.
Yeah.
So one thing I briefly touched on when I first went through this, related to a future item on the agenda here this evening, is a comprehensive plan update. So this couldn't become effective until the comp plan is amended. So it'll be a future item on here, but our plan from staff, and I kind of just breezed through it during my presentation, is that if the comp plan amendment later on the agenda is approved on first reading, that will be transmitted through the state, through their state review process. There's a 30-day review process by the state agencies and so on. We wouldn't bring this or the other items that have to be that are reliant on that comp plan amendment back for second reading until the comp plan came back for second reading. So in reality, we have 12 months until they will be back for second reading. So we can definitely, come up with some, good ways to help protect those MX1 residential properties and all that.
On top of that, I like it. If you're commercial and it's not zoned what you're supposed to be doing, thank you for finding it. Your grass is 13 inches tall, that's code too. Your dog's off a leash, that's code. Let's enforce all of our codes. I agree with it.
Sir. Other comments from council? Seeing none, please vote. And it does pass on first reading 5-2. 2148, the ordinance amending land development code chapters 1 and 2 for manufacturing uses. Thank you, council. Let's go to item 9.3, 2149, ordinance amending land development code chapters 2, 4, 5, and 6 for the creation of MX3 zoning district. Ms. Cobb.
This is ordinance 2149, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending chapters 2, 4, 5, and 6 of the Land Development Code to establish standards for MX3 mixed-use downtown high-intensity zoning district, providing for authority, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. This is first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Verstetti.
Thank you. So this item is really the continuation of the process to look at the downtown densities in accordance with the recommendations in the downtown master plan. So this process going back to 2017 and 18 with the creation and development of the downtown master plan that was adopted by the City Council in 2019. Following up from then, we've held various meetings, community meetings, town halls, stakeholder meetings, including in 2022, as well as 2023, and then last fall of 2023, we held a City Council workshop with this as well. So what this is proposed to do is to create a new mixed-use, higher intensity, downtown high-intensity zoning district that would increase the density numbers allowed within a specific boundary, certain area of properties that within the core of downtown in accordance with the master plan. In those meetings, stakeholder meetings, community workshops, we had various options ranging across the density levels. And so currently, our MX2 zoning allows up to 45 dwelling units per acre with bonus provisions, and a base density of 30 dwelling units per acre without those bonus provisions. So in the meetings we held, we started with options starting at base density of 40, so going from the existing 30 we have just to 40. We had an option of 40, 45, 60, and 100. And we had a survey, we pulled our respondents, got some data, and the majority of the feedback was actually voted for the highest density of those numbers. What we also did in the downtown master plan and the infrastructure master plan that we had developed with Matrix Design Group, they had some numbers in there looking at what number of residential units should be in the downtown in the future. And so what we did is we took the numbers they had, which was a proposed 452 multifamily residential units in the downtown area, in the downtown core, and we did the math looking at the size of the properties down there and came to a finding of it was to hit those numbers, we would need approximately 100 dwelling units per acre there. So that's why of the options we gave to the community, we went up to 100. Then we had a further stakeholder meeting held last August, like I mentioned, and had a poll of the stakeholders downtown that attended, and 50% of those that took the poll, took the survey, voted for the highest base density of 100 units, dwelling units per acre. So through that feedback, really that's where we've worked on this now, is a land development code amendment to create a mixed-use downtown high-intensity zoning with a base density of 100 dwelling units per acre up to a bonus provisions of 150 dwelling units per acre. We also have the maximum floor area ratio for non-residential development as a 3.0 floor area ratio with bonus provisions up to 4.5. That goes back to the comprehensive plan, which states that you can have a base number, and then with bonus provisions, you can increase it up to 1.5 times that amount. So that's where those bonus provision units and floor area ratio come into play. What this code does is that we, in our table of uses in Chapter 2, we have created the MX3 column in the table, and then we have gone through and put in uses that, from staff review and following the downtown master plan, and uses we feel are the allowable uses for this downtown core. Removing some of the uses in MX2, such as storage facilities and gas stations and things that we may not want in the inner core of downtown. So we worked through this. I mentioned the comp plan. Much like the last item, this is not possible with the comprehensive plan as it currently exists. So a comprehensive plan amendment would be required for these changes, and so if this does move on from first reading, it would be held for second reading until the comprehensive plan update goes through that process and comes back for second reading. There is a current limitation for density in future land development that would limit the density proposed here. Like I said, this was what we are proposing was based on the feedback we received over the last 2 years or so of stakeholder meetings. So with that, there are various updates through other chapters, chapter 4 as well, and chapter 5 and chapter 6. And all of those changes really had to do with just adding the term MX3 for consistency. So anywhere that we reference typically MX1 and MX2, we added MX3 because there were standards that apply to all of our mixed use areas. We also added the table within our own provisions for MX3. And then in chapter 5, there was some language regarding accessory buildings that are allowed in various zoning districts. So we just went ahead and added MX3 in there. And so similar in chapter 5, there was, we have standards for fence height for all zoning districts, so we went ahead and added language, just the line for MX3 for fence height standards. That's where we're through, similar for their signage. There were signage criteria for all zoning districts, so we just added MX3 within all our signage standards. We really just, searched for where MX2 existed and made sure that we added MX3 where it was needed in there. And there was also some language in chapter 6 regarding certain parking standards that were allowed in MX2 that we added MX3, much like the other updates. This item did go to the LPA at their last meeting, and the LPA did recommend approval of it as well. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend the City Council's approval of ordinance 2149. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Questions from council before Chris? Mr. Allegretto.
Mr. Fassetti, when we had that meeting in November here and we discussed this and you went over some of the stakeholder, thoughts and recommendations, et cetera, I remember asking you at that point, about the turnout of that meeting. It's listed here that there were approximately 60 residents that attended your town hall meeting discussing that situation. And I remember there was a gentleman in this room that was working on a pretty large development downtown that was, I believe, most interested in the largest density at that point. And it seemed like we had fleshed out a bunch of these options and gone over a bunch of these things at that point as far as, what that entailed, requiring parking or water runoff and all those other things. That none of that stuff has changed, correct?
Correct, yes, and that's, the numbers, I'll be the first to admit that's a big number. These are high numbers, but, when we look at these numbers, it's part of it's a piece of the puzzle. You still have to meet stormwater management, you have to meet traffic concurrency, parking standards, and all these pieces to fit in the box. This does not affect height standards for building heights in our city, period. You're still going to have the same potential size building. This really affects how you cut up the box, how many ways you can chop it up into the size units, and so that's where it's not changing. Really that impacts it. Obviously, more units is going to have an impact on traffic, but that's where you have to do traffic studies and CRA is our traffic concurrency area. So if you have over certain numbers of trips, you have to show how you're going to do things to mitigate that, or it will be, code will be allowed.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Berry.
A follow-up on Mr. Allegretto. I remember that meeting well. We also discussed parking, and I don't see anything here. We're seeing just base density. If we're going to have 100 units in this small area, where are you going to put all those cars?
Exactly. And we're not touching parking here. That's a great question. So for residential uses, the current requirement in the code is 2 parking spaces per unit. If you work for housing, you can get that lowered a little bit, but that stays. That is on the developer and applicant to figure out. Honestly, that's where it comes down to. If they don't have the space for that parking, or stormwater or other things that it doesn't meet code, it couldn't be approved.
So if I were to vote, say 100, base density of 100, how will I be assured that there's going to be parking?
They have, so how it would work if this was in the code and say someone comes in and says, I want to now build 100 units on my property because I'm allowed to, that would be a minimum, we'd be looking at basically 200 parking spaces if it's a standard development. and they would have to demonstrate that to us in the development review process that they have 200 parking spaces there to fit that. If they come in and say, well, we can't fit that parking, then there's a problem.
Thank you. Mr. Mead.
And that was a question, I'm sorry, I didn't ask you earlier. So enhancing the density does not negate or reduce the applicant's requirement to provide the requisite stormwater, parking, and the other requirements they would otherwise have.
Correct, it doesn't change any of those.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
I do, and we're going to go down the line. Yeah, it's back for me, at least for me, it's kind of cart before the horse again. First sentence, I'm about to pull it up here. I think it's the first sentence. It's in the first paragraph of the downtown master plan. It says traffic. And here we are talking about going ahead and putting in a new zoning, MX 300 an acre. And I had a ton of questions back then, and thankfully he was here, and I put it together that I was like, how is that? We're not raising our height. We're not changing the footprint. Okay, we're going to make them, I don't remember the number he said, 500-600 square feet, and that seems to be a trend that's going on, especially in towns or whatever else. So I got it, but you know, if that same footprint at the same height had 8, opulent, incredible condos at 12,000 square feet each, there would be 8 cars of travel into downtown. But now we're talking about implementing an MX3, which would be 100 an acre. We know of one subject developer. I wish him the best of luck. I hope it comes together. I know something's going to come together beautifully there at some point, but that's a lot of traffic. And we don't know yet. I mean, that cart before the horse, we're not done with the PD&E. Is that correct? Is it the PD&E where we're at on that stage right now? I'm like, well, shouldn't we wait to see if the PD&E is what they're gonna talk about and recommend? And the other variable there, of course, I'm in its target line, my personal property, my business property that I own, and obviously, the state, if Around the Mound comes together, enough skin in the game, and they want us to do it, and we're all there, and it comes together, there's going to be land being acquired. And so we change these codes, and one particular or 50 particular properties get a new zoning on it, MX3, and they go and they come and apply. 8 developers, I could be one of them. I could personally benefit from what I'm talking about here. So I apply for a development on my property of 12 units, and the state says, hey, I need to buy it. How much does it cost the state under MX3 as compared to currently? It's a lot more. I know there's a formula out there, but so we're talking about changing land development codes here before, if we change this and the state's evaluating how much is it going to cost for us, the state, to run a road, this direction or that or what, it's like, well, oh man, they got MX3 and they got 8 developments there, all that have 100 units on it. The state's going to go, man, that's prohibitive. We're not going to be able to buy that land. Whereas if they had 40 units on it and there was only 2 developments in place, the state might go, yeah, we can swing that. That's 50 million, 70 million, 100 million. I don't know what the number's going to be, but all of these things come into play in that. And I know I'm not on the inside of information. I'm not on the transportation things or whatever else. And there might be other things in play that I'm just oblivious to, but it just seems concerning to me that we're talking about MX3 and these densities, and we're talking about a road coming through which the state has to evaluate dollars that they're going to have to spend to make this, which we all want around the mound. I want around the mound. I don't know where it's going to go, when it's going to come or anything else, but I want it. But if our changes are cost prohibitive to them, that they go, no, not going to do it. Y'all going to have to keep going through downtown like we've all been hating for so long, because we've now got, which again, if he gets 100 units an acre or 60 or 80, whatever, I don't care. I'd like to see something on that beautiful piece of property there, but it does add to our traffic problem and our master, and I'm going to pull it up here because it always stood out. First page, conceptual pro forma, central to any redevelopment effort is the financial feasibility of the project. That's 6.2. I'm sorry, that's the financial, which we've not seen yet, but the traffic was central. It's first and foremost. And we're talking about zoning issues, not traffic issues. So I don't, again, cart before the horse as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. And one thing to note too, that I didn't mention, I should have, presentation was that even if this is put in the code, there are not any current MX3 zone properties. So if this is passed, there would be another step in that process after the comp plan, after the land development code amendment to create this zoning district. Then it would have to be a rezoning of the properties within that inner core area, which would be a separate process. It can be city initiated, but it would come back to the council at some later date. Definitely valid concerns. Traffic is obviously a key point, 100% right on that. But even if this was put in the code, the property would not become MX3 overnight. It would change from MX2 that they are now. It would have to be another separate process to actually go through. There's a state law spells out a city-initiated rezoning process. And
sure.
Time frames and there's requirements to property and everything like that. So just to keep in mind.
No, I mean, I get it. I'm a part of that downtown, and I mean, I'm on one side, and then the other side, I'm like, well, if it becomes MX3, my property's value has just probably gone up to my neighbor or to even the subject property next door. It's gone up. Its value has gone up. So I want to see it come. I want to see it around the mountain come. Again, the cart before the horse, and it feels like there's probably some motives that I'm not aware of that's causing it to fall in place like this. Because otherwise, I think the process would just have us waiting for the PD&E to come on our current existing infrastructure. Maybe not. Maybe they say, look, maybe somebody's whispering in somebody's ear that y'all need to do this before we complete the PD&E. I don't know.
Sure, and I can address that from what I know of it. Really, it wasn't. We did have the one developer that some mentioned there that asked us about it.
Sure.
And when we were going through the master plan there, there's all those kind of to-do lists, kind of
sure.
bullet points there, and we've been trying to work our way through them. And this was just one on there that was like, oh, we can start that process, which was where the town hall meeting started back about 2 years ago. And we've taken our time over the last 2 years trying to hold meetings every so often, and up to the workshop with you all in November. And really it was just into the spring here. That's where we said, well, we think we've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of different people, so let's just go ahead and work on this item and bring it forward for discussion. With it requiring a comp plan update, since we're looking at comp plan updates for the manufacturing and other things in there, we said, well, if we do the same, the reason that they're all on the same agenda tonight is because they're all interconnected when it comes to the comp plan and to touching different sections of the code. It's just, not the most fun for everyone to have to go through as many items, but it was just kind of the most efficient way to go through having to do a comp plan amendment and a development code amendment to kind of knock it all out if possible.
Sure. Well, I mean, his client over there that was, it just all came together at the same time to make a, good plea for it. I was looking at the chart you provided on relationship to downtown by those votes. We got 3 votes. We got 7 votes. We got 3 downtown property owners voted, and we got 4 downtown business owners. We got 7 out of all of those votes were actually, I think you got downtown resident. It just seems like such a big project. We would have had better input, greater outreach, input, town hall meetings. I don't know. It just seems like there's so few people who gave input. Maybe nobody cares.
Yeah, so that was a meeting that we had about 70 or so people, over 60 people show up for, and this was, pushed out there, and then afterwards too.
Was that the one that was down at Enlightened Studios?
Yes, it was.
Right, I remember that. There weren't any official votes though, were there? There was a raise of hands, right?
No, we actually did an online poll.
Okay.
This was through Microsoft's polling system online, so there we had to get the link and the QR code set up on the screen for everybody, and then afterwards we had a sign-in sheet, so everybody that signed in with an email address, we emailed out the link and the information afterwards asking for their feedback. So that's where these results came from.
I got you. 10 responses. I see that. 7 responses. 10, 7. That was the August of 23. That wasn't the, that was not the Enlightened, or it was?
Yeah, that was the, we had some, the downtown group and some property owners down there was at that time.
Because there were only 10 responses on that one.
So that one, yes, and that was a group of about 15 people who got the responses on it. So the one prior to it, it may not be listed here, but it was, that's where we had the 60 or 70, that's where we had, let's see, 18, 22, 29, it looks like 29 votes from the first.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Other comments from council? Mr. Meade.
The point of the council is to get other people's opinions, and your point is well taken. If we make it cost prohibitive, then maybe we push them away. But a question for you, Mr. Forsetti, if north of First Street, would that be part of the MX3, or is it? It's my understanding, I'm probably wrong, that it's only south of First Street.
That's correct.
Okay, so if it's north of First Street, then they have a lower density, maybe lower property value, to where if because they're doing something with Highway 98 in some fashion. They're enhancing the flow of traffic. They're doing it from Pensacola, they've been doing it.
Oh, sure, yeah, I've seen it.
So we know they're doing something. So if we enhance the density south of First Street, that would then enhance the value of the properties on either side of Miracle Strip Parkway, Highway 98. So maybe by doing this, we would make running Highway 98 through downtown less feasible, and having the less dense use north of First Street, where a lot of the taking will be. Maybe to your point, maybe they push their taking up there and completely around the mound by, maybe it's encouraged by this higher density use south of First Street. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I'm just so thankful for you talking about it, because I think that, incentivizing the state is what we're talking about there. And if we develop these MX3 and we see developments coming in, there's going to be property taxes and other taxes that are benefiting to them that could help in the PD&E. It's just that it's not coming out front that that's being disclosed that way. It's like, well, let's just do this, and then while we wait on the PD&E. When if someone from the state or otherwise could say, guys, man, if you guys go in there and make all that MX3 down there, and we can see the revenue that's going to come from that will support us spending $150 or $250 million to go around it, we're in. Well, that's okay, that makes sense. But that's not the way it's being done. It's the cart before the horse kind of thing that I'm feeling, and whether, again, I'm not in the know of all of the transportation stuff that's going on, but I just try to make sense of it, and I'm going, guys, we're just probably out of, right now from what I know, we're just out of order, but.
It's a workshop next week you can come to if you
Yeah,
want.
I'll come to that one. So, yeah, appreciate it, that was very helpful.
Other comments from council for Mr. Forsetti? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this one? Council, may we get a motion?
Mayor, I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2149 to amend the Land Development Code, Chapter 2, 4, 5, and 6 to create standards for an MX3 zoning district.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Jeter, second by Councilman Allegretto to approve 2149, an ordinance amending Land Development Code, Chapter 2, 4, 5, and 6 for the creation of MX3 zoning district. Further comments? Comments?
Mr. Mayor, let me, Ms. Cobb, with me owning property in there, in these affected zones, as I've disclosed that I'm potentially a benefactor of an MX3, which I'm voting on, would it be appropriate for me to abstain?
For these general citywide ordinances?
Well, it is MX3 that is described, and it's laid over my property right now. So would it be appropriate for me to abstain?
Not really.
Really?
No. assuming you don't own a very large, like 1% of the property in the zoning district, which I'm sure you probably don't. It's a big city, so you don't need to abstain.
But I could.
If you feel that you cannot make an unbiased decision, then you should abstain.
I'll abstain.
Okay.
Council, please vote. And just passes 6-0 with one abstention with Mr. Parker. All right, let's do one more and then we're going to take a break. 9.4, 2150, ordinance amending the comprehensive plan. Ms. Cobb.
Ordinance 2150, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan of the city, providing for consistency, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Mr. Rossetti.
Thank you. So this is the item that kind of ties a lot of what we discussed together. We did discuss when we were preparing this agenda packet, the order of some of these, as well, whether it should be in the front or at the end of all of these ordinances with land code amendments. We felt that it might be better to get into the weeds, into the details of the why we're requesting this comprehensive plan amendment first, and then come in and kind of wrap it up with this item. So what we're requesting here to do is to do an amendment to the comprehensive plan for a few items. So one is the manufacturing that we discussed earlier. Currently, there's some restrictions in the future land use element regarding where manufacturing is or isn't allowed. And so what we're proposing is to add the word heavy manufacturing under commercial to make it clear that that's what we're talking about there, as well as some of those other industrial uses. And then under the mixed use land use category, add in the light manufacturing that we discussed. We also have just a few minor clerical updates. We have a future land use map, which at the time was adopted in 2020, so we attached probably the 2024 future land use map and updated the reference in there for that. Regarding the density, the last item that you all just voted on, we do propose to increase the maximum residential dwelling, residential density, and maximum floor area ratio in accordance with the previous item for MX3 zoning. And then lastly, there was a state law, there was a statute amendment a couple years back that required all cities, jurisdictions adopt a property rights element. And so the language in the statute was that a local government must adopt a property rights element in a comprehensive plan, either at the next proposed plan amendment date after the July 1st, 2021 date, or the date of the next scheduled evaluation and appraisal report. The evaluation and appraisal report is a process required per statute and for the state. Once every 5 years, once every 7 years, you have to evaluate your comp plan and see if it needs to be updated. In this case, the last time we updated the plan was right before the property rights element requirements went in place, so we haven't had an evaluation and appraisal report yet. So being that this is the first comprehensive plan update we've had since that law went into effect, we went ahead and added the property rights element in here as well. The language from the property rights element was actually provided in statute by the state. So as an option, we don't have to use the state's language, but they do provide it. So in our case, we did take the state property rights element language and just fit it into the formatting of our existing comprehensive plan. So really, those are the only changes. This process, how it works, if approved on first reading, we have to transmit it to the state. They have a 30-day, and state and other agencies, other surrounding jurisdictions and agencies, they have 30 days to review it and provide any feedback to us. If there's any changes, we'd have to make any changes in accordance with the state. If there's either way, if there's not, or if there are, it would then come back for a following reading by the council. So it's a few month process. There's specific dates and deadline for transmittal periods and all that we would have to follow in here. Like as mentioned, this really is to affect the density, MX3 zoning, the manufacturing, and then also the property rights element, and updated future land use map. Just because we were in here and doing these updates, we included that as well. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend the adoption of ordinance 2150, and this also was approved, recommended, for approval by the LPA.
Thank you, sir. questions from council for Mr. Pacetti? Go ahead, Mr. Gloria.
I'll clarify it one more time and dumb it down for me, okay? Are we, property rights element, we're speaking about property rights like my property rights in R1?
Yes, private property rights. There is a state law that says that we shall include a certain language, certain sentences in the comprehensive plan regarding private property rights for people in the state of Florida, and that's what we're adding in here is what the state has specified we shall add.
And then further on down to amend restrictions on manufacturing and density.
Yes. Yes, that is for the previous items that we discussed, which would allow the increased density for MX3 zoning, and then also allow the light manufacturing in our mixed-use, future land use areas, and then zoning.
So that last part, restrictions on manufacturing and density, that's in the mixed use we're talking about. So
the manufacturing in mixed use.
And then the other one.
The density is for the MX3 zoning downtown specifically.
And then property rights element.
Yes.
What does that include?
That includes, there's 4 items, basically 4 sentences that the state says we must adopt if we amend our comprehensive plan or by the next time we adopt our comprehensive plan. So it's 4 sentences discussing the rights of property owners to physically possess or control his or her interest in the property, including easements, leases, or mineral rights, the rights of a property owner to maintain, use, develop, and improve his or her property for their personal use or for the use of another person, and the rights of property owner to privacy and to exclude others from property to protect the owner's possession of property, and then lastly, the right of a property owner to dispose of his or her property through sale or gift. So it's 4 statements, 4 sentences that the state says every city shall adopt, basically.
Go back to number 1, easement, did you say?
The right of a property owner to physically possess or control his or her interest in the property, including easements, leases, or mineral rights.
Okay, expand on easements. We can have all that, mineral rights, everything.
So the state passed a law, it's in chapter 163, and it says the legislature wants cities and governments to recognize private property rights. So all of you cities now need to put, and counties actually, need to put this language into your comprehensive plan. And then the statute actually tells you exactly what to put in your plan. So what you're doing is just recognizing the rights. It's not actually changing anything. So that particular sentence that you're asking about, the right of a property owner to physically possess and control his or her interest in the property, including easements, leases, or mineral rights. That just means to the extent your property might have an easement, lease, or mineral right on it, you're in control of your private property.
Well, that'd be nice for a change, huh?
Yeah, it's actually very pro private property rights.
Yeah, I like that part. Thank you. Thank you.
And then did you explain the map change? I heard the other 3.
Just briefly, yeah, so the current map in there is just out of date because of the future land use map changes that have happened over the last 4 or so years. So we were updating the future land use map just with the existing ordinance in place at this time.
So it's not changing
It's
anybody's
not changing
future land.
anybody's property. It's just, as you know, from time to time, we'll bring forward a future land use map amendment. This is just attaching that current map into the comprehensive plan, not changing anything.
Okay.
Mr. Smith?
Just as a clarification, this heavy manufacturing and light manufacturing, I don't see anything in there about the medium manufacturing because obviously that
Yes.
ordinance hasn't passed. I'm assuming that if it does, you'll have to go in there and update that to include medium manufacturing?
Yes, that is that's a good question. We'll have to update that.
Other questions from council?
Just you and I discussed, it came up in here that, what is it that, so we're talking about MX3 and the densities there, and there's some state law that, ordinance that passed that says you may not deny the same to someone outside of this, what may get zoned as MX3, that right must be afforded to others within the city limits.
That was with respect to the workforce housing or affordable housing statute that said when certain criteria is met for that type of housing, the density that you allow in your your greatest density allowed in your mixed use or commercial or industrial district needs to be allowed in all of those districts then. So if you had a high density in one mixed use district, it would be allowed in all of them for that particular type of workforce or affordable housing.
And it was only dealing with workforce and affordable
Yeah,
housing?
and had to meet criteria for the
Right.
statute. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this? Seeing none, council, may we get a motion?
Mayor, so moved with staff's recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Schmidt, seconded by Councilman Meade to approve 2150 ordinance amending the comprehensive plan. Further comment?
Looking forward to the second reading.
All right. Council, please vote. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you, council. At this point, I'm going to recommend we take a 10-minute break, and let's get back in here at 8:26.
Hungry.
Oh, my God.
All right, it's 8:26. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. We're going to start with item 9.5, 2151 ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, section 2.00.05, city excess real property. Ms. Cobb.
Ordinance 2151, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending the City of Fort Walton Beach Code of Ordinances, Section 2.00.05, city excess real property, providing for applicability, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Paccetti.
Thank you. This is an item actually came up as a recommendation by our attorney, Jeff Burns. This was one that had a situation come up with a property owner in the city, Greater Peace Church, that in doing some of their due diligence, I believe, they came across a reverter clause in their property, in their deed, that property was originally transferred to them. It was previously owned by the city, and there was a reverter clause in that deed that was to be used for parking or for single-family residential use only. And this is a property that they'd previously been in to talk to the council about doing workforce housing on. And so they reached out to the city manager and asking, how this could be resolved as far as removing or changing that reverter, because they want to do residential, just not single family detached residential as specified in the deed. So me and my staff looked over our code, and we got with Mr. Burns as well, and Jeff looked at the code and statute, and there is no process currently identified in our code or anywhere to specify how to kind of process or deal with those situations where there's a deed or a reverter clause that could come back for city council's review, request to change or remove. So Mr. Burns' request to staff was to go ahead and just add a subsection into Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances under the excess real property, city property section. What his request was, and what we've added in here, was to have a small process really dealing with the reverter interest in real property owned by private properties. So basically, if there's a private property that has a reverter clause back to the city, if that private party wants to amend or remove the city-owned reverter interest, this is a very short process to just spell out how somebody could go about doing that. And really, all this is. It's not a specific request yet at this time, although we do expect one coming from Greater Peace. But this would basically outline an application process that could come in to the city. They would have to submit either title work from a licensed title company or a legal opinion of an attorney through the Florida Bar. And then also an opinion from a licensed real estate, a licensed property appraiser as to the value of the reverter interest. Staff would review it, basically prepare an item for council's consideration with some type of recommendation, and then ultimately it's up to the city council to decide whether or not you want to either amend, remove, or otherwise change that reverter interest, or do nothing at all and deny the request. So, like I said, really it's just a very simple, straightforward process we just tried to outline. I know talking to Mr. Burns, it was discussing, well, we have this one-off situation now, and we could take these on a case-by-case just to the council, but we haven't had this come up before in my experience here. But what if one comes up, sometime from now, or 50 years from now, whenever from now, his recommendation was it'd be nice to have a process just in the code so that we're not scratching our heads trying to figure out what to do with this when it comes in. So with that, we are respectfully recommending the adoption on this Code of Ordinance amendment to Section 2.00.05. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council on item 9.5 for Mr. Paccetti? Mr. Meade.
Thank you for putting a policy in place that we can predict on, or have some prediction with. My request, if it sounds like there's one imminent, I would like to know, in addition to these items, the value, the reverter, and so on and so forth, why we originally placed a reverter on these items. So I know you can't answer that today, I'm not asking you to, but this one or any other one, I'd like to know the thought process, if it's possible, of the existing council and why they did those reverter clauses.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council?
Oh, I thought that was, you don't know the answer to that?
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking specifically.
No,
for
we're
their-
not here, that's not before us today, so I don't think
It's
it's
not.
relevant, but.
But here's what I'm curious about.
Sure. So I haven't dug fully into it, but we've done some research into it. It was that property specifically, and I don't know how it originally came into our hands, but it was purchased through CDBG funds, which are limited to certain types of target groups. And so there was, it was a transfer to the church, to that organization, but there was also other properties throughout the city. That city council at the time, this is back in 1995, we're looking at selling or transferring, and so in this case, there was some discussion looking at, okay, well, because it was originally purchased by HUD, they wanted to say, well, it's going to be used for a civic or religious use or for single-family housing. Haven't dug fully into it, but it had to do with the fact that it was originally owned or purchased through HUD funds, that they wanted to put a reverter onto this one. So that I've discussed.
All right. Other questions from council? Anyone from the public wish to comment on this? Mr. Williams?
Yes, I really do need to comment on that, if you will. Since I was here in 1995 when this was actually done, I've been probably the only one in my church that was here and has that knowledge. In fact, I'm the one that came before council in 1995 and requested the transaction. What the staff doesn't realize is that, and the reason I'm here asking that the reverter clause be removed, goes to the question that Mr. Mead asked. We weren't given the property. It wasn't donated to the church. What happened is that we wanted those 2 lots at the end of our church, and in order for us to acquire it, we had to go out and purchase 2 lots of similar size, and exchange those 2 lots with the city for the 2 lots at the end of it that we received from the city. And so I'm like you. I gave you $1, you gave me $1. I didn't put any restrictions on the dollar I gave you, and I'm trying to figure out why I had restrictions on the dollar you gave back to me. You know, if it hadn't been donated to us, certainly we would have understood there being some sort of a quote clause. But this was it was an exchange of property, 2 lots for 2 lots. Now, in 1995, which is 29 years ago, we were concerned about parking. You know, we were told that if we were going to expand the church, we had to have parking that was suitable for the expansion. We were sort of grandfathered in for the parking we had currently. And then Habitat for Humanity came to the church one day and said, and we had never met him before, he said, met with me and Reverend Seymour, and he said, we just want to introduce ourselves. We're from Habitat for Humanity, and guess what? We're going to build 2 houses on the end of the street here. And they were happy, and they thought we were too. And I looked at them and said, oh, heck no, I might not have used that term. But, and they were a little bit shocked when I said that, because I said, well, if you do that, you're going to landlock us, and we're not going to have the opportunity to expand the church, have the parking that we would need. And so when they heard that, we got with the city and worked out this deal to the property exchange. And probably I was so glad to be able to do the exchange, I didn't realize we had a reverter. Plus I was about 40 years younger at the time. I think 29 years younger, so I didn't know as much as I know now. So long story short is, I'm just saying, I don't understand why we would have had just a simple exchange of lots without any clause. I bring this other point to you as well. The exchange took place between 3 entities, Habitat for Humanity, the church, and I think it was another organization, I have it in my notes over there, I don't know if I can bring my notes. There were 3 organizations that were getting lots. I have a copy of my deed with a reverter clause where we did an exchange of lots. But the deed for the other 2 organizations, which were also nonprofits and received lots from CBG, has no reverter clause in it. Yeah. Mr. Mead, doesn't take rocket science just to understand or figure out what the heck is going on with that. Why are we the only ones that have a reverter clause? I'm not trying to say there was any nefarious reason for that other than to say, I can't understand what, where that's fair. They were donating their lots without any exchange. We exchanged our lots, and we donated that reverter clause. But I have a copy of their deed as well. So we came here tonight for simple request is to remove the revert clause and allow us to continue on. As you know, we do want to build multi-unit lots or property on that property in order to help out with the workforce housing needs that we have in our city. This revert clause doesn't allow us to do that. We can either build part of it or two single-family homes lot, or one single-family homes lot. So I respectfully ask, and I don't think we ought to have to come under the new rules. I'm not against this resolution. I think this resolution is fine. I just don't think that Greater Peace ought to be subjected to it, if you will, simply for the two reasons I give you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public wishes to comment on this?
Mr. Mayor, may I
Yes,
ask
sir.
one question real quick?
Certainly.
Kim, it's my understanding that there is not a vehicle to remove the reverter clause, and that's essentially what this ordinance does. It gives us a vehicle to have the ability to remove a reverter clause, correct?
Correct, and it gives,
Okay.
you, it gives you a code process that you can always use in a consistent manner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis, for that question. Yes, Mr. Alvarado.
So, Ms. Cobb, this would allow us to remove that reverter clause?
You would still follow this process to remove that reverter clause. Passing it tonight doesn't remove it.
Correct.
Right.
But
Correct.
this would allow us to remove reverter clauses that currently exist, not just ones from the future.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Only because we've been touching on it a little bit, and I know this lot down here at the end of City Hall here, it went back to the trust without a reverter clause. I mean, it was just.
So this is for property we own that has a reverter clause.
We own.
Yeah, and so so
they
your question
own-
is?
No, it's they owned.
They own the reverter on it.
They own the reverter, got it. Thank you.
Other questions from council? Any other comments from the public? Council, may we get a motion?
I move we adopt ordinance 2151, amending COO section 2.00.05, city excess real property.
Second.
And moved by Councilman Meade and second by Councilman Schmidt to approve 2151 ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, section 2.00.05, city excess real property. Further comment?
Thank you to our professional attorneys who are giving us the proper vehicle to conduct business. So the Department of Course, this is a good example of having a policy and procedure in place so everyone can have something to predict on.
Thank you, sir. Other comment?
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm hopeful that we can then, at a future meeting, once this is passed and we do have this vehicle, then go forward and address Mr. Williams' concerns and the church's concerns and get that taken care of. Obviously, we want to look at everything involved, but I'm hopeful that this will provide us that opportunity to right that wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council, please vote. Does pass unanimously. Thank you, council. Brings us to item 10.1, 2146, ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 5, accessory uses and structures. Ms. Cobb.
Ordinance 2146, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 5 of the Land Development Code for supplemental standards for storage buildings, storage sheds, greenhouses, and detached garages or carports, providing for authority, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. This is second reading.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Frasetti.
Thank you. So this is the second reading of this LDC amendment regarding the use of shipping containers at storage buildings. Following the first reading, there was the council's direction on first reading had some recommendations to amend the proposed code language, following some recommendations from LPA and changing some of those recommendations as well to make them your own. So what I've done in this item since first reading, in the section of strike run on within the ordinance here, under section F, where the items are identified, you may see number 7 stricken regarding the prohibition within the CRA. I went ahead and updated all the language in here. I'll start at the beginning of number 6, which regarding the screening. We originally just had language about fencing or landscaping to screen them. The direction we received was to also look at maybe in lieu of screening, doing a decorative facade. So we developed some language that we put in here, just being consistent with other language in the land development code regarding facade requirements. So section 6 was just expanded there. Section number 7 we did remove, and then further down in the numbering here, there's what becomes number 9 is that there was discussion over the commercial use or used as habitable space or rented out. We further clarified that based on the council direction to make it noted that a habitable space is only specific to this as a shed, as a storage building, but it would still be allowed as a legally permitted dwelling if it meets the land development code for an accessory dwelling or residential dwelling. So we didn't want it to be misunderstood and misconstrued to say that there's no way that this could be a residential use. I know we discussed some of those accessory dwellings that if they meet the code standards for those, they're still okay. So I put that language in there. And then we kept or put back in place the language for mattress or beds shall not be stored or located with a shipping container, which is one of those LPA recommendations to remove. We kept that here. So just made those changes, like I said, based on first reading. We've not received any other comments or any other changes since first reading. So with that, staff does respectfully recommend the City Council's adoption of ordinance number 2146, amending Chapter 5 of the Land Development Code for accessory uses for storage containers.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council? Ms. Berry?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Number 1 here, you've added detached garages. What do you mean by, how are you addressing detached garages? You're putting...
where are you referencing?
2146 ordinance amending LDC chapter.
Oh, are you on B?
She's at the first paragraph on 10.1. I think that's just the heading of the entire.
Yes, that's the heading of that section of the code. We're not changing anything for detached garages.
So the parts we're changing are underlined if we are adding text, or struck through if we're removing it. So the part on detached garages isn't underlined, so that's just existing code.
Okay, so that wasn't included in
No change.
Correct.
Other questions from it? Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
You know, after that last meeting, and I sent pictures to 204, the address is behind 101 Chicago and 204 3rd Street, I think it is. After that long discussion that we had at the last meeting, that we were not, the shipping containers were not to have anyone living in it and all. So I drive by and I go, holy moly, that is nicely painted and got a window there, and lo and behold, someone's living there. And can you explain that? After we had already said that they couldn't do it, now we're allowing people to do it?
They've been allowed currently, and this ordinance would not change that. What we are saying in here and how the code existing reads currently is that we have residential standards for number of dwelling units, that number of houses, number of rental units that can fit on a property. If you meet the criteria in the land development code, basically for setbacks, impervious surface, all these things that you can on a site, you can build it. So if it's a shipping container or a site-built house or a modular manufactured type home, if it meets land development code as well as building code, then you can build it there. So that's allowed, and we're not proposing to change it. That's actually why in number 9 here, we even specifically called out that this would not prohibit shipping containers being used as a legally permitted dwelling. So if someone wants to use a dwelling and convert it make it meet the building code, make it meet the land development code, residential design standards, they can still do that based on this. This is only if someone wants to use it basically as a storage building, like a shed.
Mr. Walker?
Except it can't be hooked up to water, electric, or sewer.
But
in number 11, right?
For a storage use. This does not affect residential.
Shipping
uses.
containers, this shall not prohibit the use of shipping containers as legally permitted dwelling. But then 11 said shipping containers shall not be hooked up to any water, sewer, or septic. So I wouldn't want to live in there.
No, this is only for it as a accessory use as a shed. In reality, the additional language in 9 that specifies that they still be allowed as a permissible dwelling really isn't needed, because this is only if you want to use it as a shed, as a box on your property to store your stuff. These standards apply. If you came in saying I want to build my house out or a commercial business restaurant, say, you could still use it any other way. This is if you come in saying I want a permanent accessory structure on my property to store my belongings, then you have to follow these criteria. This is only for accessory structures as a storage building. This is where we've seen, and there's a few around town that you may have seen some just plain shipping containers popping up on properties. People are using them as sheds. They're easier to set in place and forget. Then you have to build something there, go through the process. This is just, like I said, to be really used as a storage building.
Well, really 11 then should probably say shipping containers used as storage or accessories shall not be hooked up to water, sewer, or septic, because it would prevent, this language would prevent one showing up to have one legally permitted as a dwelling unit, say, well, we can't do it because you can't hook, is it up there? Shipping containers, right, shipping containers? Shipping containers there.
Purpose of
Storage
This is
buildings.
only for the purpose of storage.
Well, then why are we addressing living?
And we're not.
We're saying if it's a storage
Living
building,
is
you can't
already
put
addressed
mattresses
in the residential.
We referenced
code.
those sections in here just for further clarification, because I know there was a lot of question between the LPA and
Because I
council.
think we were distinguishing in number 9 that you can't use it as habitable space, a shipping container. But you can if it's a residential dwelling unit under the reference section, so that's why they.
Trying to look at the unintended consequences. If something came up a years from now, and somebody looked at this code and just said, oh no, you can't use it as habitable space. That's not the intent here. It's you can't use a storage building as habitable space. But you
And I'm there with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that those two side by side, 9 and 11, seem to conflict. We could further clarify 11 by saying shipping containers used as storage, because we know that shipping containers used as a dwelling unit can, but this theoretically could.
Yes, that's implied under 5.01.07, storage buildings,
Storage
storage sheds, shipping containers, greenhouses, detached garages, and carports.
I'll read that.
Says nothing about residential right there, so nothing residential applies to that.
It does, 9. This shall not prohibit the use of shipping containers as legally permitted dwelling in a court and dwelling. I mean, it shouldn't, then we should remove dwelling in 9. We could tweak 9 or 11, but if we're not talking about dwelling, why talk about dwelling?
Well,
And-
probably the clearest way to do it, if we were going to make a change, is to put a sentence at the beginning and just say the following only apply to storage containers, and nothing herein takes away your rights to use, to meet the criteria for a dwelling unit under 4 and 5. If you really wanted to. Because all of this, it's not just 9 and 11, it's the
Right,
whole
the whole
thing.
thing, and that's what's referenced in section F, is
Yeah.
that for the purposes
If
of
you
this
find it.
section, here's what's required.
Other comments from council? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this?
So the greenhouses are included in there just because people use the greenhouse for storage?
This section of the code, 5.01.07, is related to any accessory structures that someone could have on property, such as storage buildings, storage sheds. greenhouses, detached garages, or carports currently. We were just proposing to add in the shipping containers as another section within the existing section of storage buildings.
So greenhouses are used as storage?
No, ma'am. This is for any accessory. This is accessory structure. So basically, anything that's not your home, those accessory buildings on your property is what this is. So not necessarily for storage, but it could be any type of accessory use. Greenhouses, garages, storage buildings.
Well, my question is...
Sharon, you're gonna have to come up here,
I'm
or
sorry.
if Mayor allows it, I don't know, but we gotta do one or the other, so.
I'm sorry. I'm curious only because I know of a property that has a greenhouse.
Stores plants.
Sorry?
It's probably stores plants.
Well, no, it's not storage.
Stores cars.
Yeah, it's for plants, but, so how do greenhouses play into this? I'm confused.
It's an accessory structure.
Yeah.
It's not a house, but it's on the property. Just like a shed, a carport, a garage, a storage building, a shipping container, a lean-to.
It's structures besides your home on the same property, whether it's storage or not. Could be a greenhouse.
Okay, I just didn't understand how that came into play. Okay, sorry.
Other questions for Mr. Mercedes? Council, back to you. May we get a motion?
Move it, ordinance 2146.
Second.
Seconds passed. Been moved by Councilman Allegretto and seconded by Councilman Smith to approve 2146, an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 5, accessory uses and structures. Further comment, sir?
No, sir.
Comment, Travis? Council, please vote. It does pass unanimously. Thank you, Council. That brings us to item 11, action, direction, discussion. 11.1 has been deferred till a future date. 11.2, Fort Walton Beach, Ocean City Wright Fire Consolidation Study. Chief Morgan.
Chairman Morgan, Fire Chief of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Honorable Mayor and Council. This is going to be an update to the RFQ process. So as you're all aware, back in April, Councilman Schmidt made a motion to move forward with the RFQ to do a fire consolidation study between our two organizations. That was passed. I was tasked with working with the Ocean City Chief Wagner on developing a scope of work, which we did. We developed a scope of work to allow for future consolidation of other agencies. Prior to actually submitting the RFQ, we received an unsolicited proposal from another company that just kind of gave us a baseline. That proposal did not include all aspects of the scope of work, so just future warning that will probably increase the price a little bit once I get the scope of work. But during that discussion, several council members stated that they would like to see Ocean City reach out and contribute financially and administratively. That's to do two things. One, eliminate any bias to the results, because both parties are equally involved, and it also eliminates the 100% burden placed on the city and citizens. That proposal was submitted to Ocean City with a request to get a commitment administratively and financially. Their board discussed it. They submitted a letter back. I believe each of you received. So the only thing we're asking, staff's asking with the scope of work and the letter response from Ocean City, a direction that you would like us to pursue in pursuing the RFQ.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. Anyone from council wish to address this? Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I appreciate the professionalism with you and your team. You know, it's been a conversation that's been going on for about 5 different chiefs through the 2 different agencies and different key stakeholders that from an economic development standpoint, how are we addressing the growth and the different statutes that have recently come out with when properties annex and how that'll impact Fort Walton Beach because of the ad valorem continuing to go to the special district and how to address this. So again, I appreciate your professionalism, you know, as we go through this process. I know Chief Wagner can't be here tonight as well. But more importantly, I just want to highlight and take a moment the development in the leadership between two agencies and their cultures, and that how that relationship has improved tremendously between the two agencies. And again, with your leadership, as well as Chief Wagner, and before that, Chief Bundrick, developing that relationship between the two agencies, because when we first started this process, it wasn't healthy. And that was kind of some of the big convictions that I think some people within the agency at Fort Walton Beach, as well as within the agency at Ocean City Wright, had conversations about going through this process, as well as to the Chamber of Commerce back in the early 90s and other things. So we formally gave the opportunity for the other agency to be involved, both financially and administratively. They're not wanting to be involved, which I respect that, unless if that voting body for that special fire district wants to, champion an issue of running for that fire district commissioner office to entertain consolidation, then great. But at this point, I really don't have any much interest in moving forward, with this study if we're not going to be mutually, supporting this financially. But again, I just want to commend you and your efforts and your leadership, as well as Chief Bundrick and Chief Wagner now, on the development of the leadership and the culture inside of both agencies. Has made a tremendous improvement. I still have some concerns that I think are way out of our control up here, even at the county commission level. I still have concerns with our economic development, with our growth, how we're addressing. If I was king for a day, it'd be nice to have the whole South End underneath one leadership and chain of command, because this conversation has really all been about what's the best way to provide the fire safety service, regardless of whose name's on the side of the truck. So I wanted to start it off with that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Smith?
Words mean different things to different people, and so when I read that letter, obviously they said that they were willing to contribute financially or administratively. I guess my question is trying to maybe drill more into that administratively comment in there. So just out of curiosity, if for some reason we were to fully burden ourselves with this study, and I'm assuming we would need some sort of cooperation from them in getting into their books and stuff like that, kind of looking at stuff. I know that stuff's public record too, but there's some nuances to it. Just out of curiosity, that means that they would have no interest in helping us do that at all, or?
Yeah, to me, administratively means willingly give us everything. The company willingly give the study company any of the paperwork, finances, and everything else they need. Otherwise, they'll have to do a public records request for everything.
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, I want to thank Councilman Smith for years ago in educating me on what the financials looked like to you then, and I became involved with Councilman Patrick and went and met with Chief Bundrick on several occasions. And once again, I began to look to try to figure out how the clock worked, and learned about how a fire district works different financially than a city. And when we start comparing trying to compare apples to apples, it got a little tricky. Whether it was fleet maintenance, which they include in their own, the administrative cost is all contained within it, whereas we have HR that has a percentage out to our staff HR, and then fleet maintenance and a portion of it. So, I'm not saying, we did something earlier tonight, we talked about that study there and saving that $100,000, I don't want to make a motion to nominate Travis to once again do the financials, but you did a great job on them then. And my recollection of it on the high level, to include fleet maintenance, HR, the one thing that was not considered, and I understand it's a big part of the consideration, but I think the fire union can provide some, because the retirement, the matching funds, the pensions, that kind of stuff, that's all a big part of the consideration. And outside of those three things, we can compare apples to apples. Can we not?
Look, you put a financial statement in front of me, I can give you some pretty 30,000 foot views from pretty much any business that exists in the world. But when you want to start talking about something that is as intricate as this is, not to mention we weren't even talking about the pensions, it would be foolish to even attempt to try to put a number together without having somebody that does this for a living day in and day out. We wouldn't even be able to begin to guess the nuances of this stuff. And, you know, I'm smart enough to know that I'm dumb enough not to try that. You know, so I can put, hey, your total budget's $6 million. You got, you know, 66 employees. Your cost of average per employee is this. Our cost of average per employee is this. Why are we more than you are? Then we need to start looking down at apparatuses and kind of break it down that way and stuff like that. But there is so many more nuanced stuff to this that, you know, personally, if it were solely up to me and we could get them to at least participate in giving us the stuff, I'd spend the money for the study even if it was $100,000. And the reason why is I've sat on this council when we spent some money on some pretty stupid stuff. Mainly come to think of it, $70,000, $65,000 for a library relocation study that wasn't going to do anything for anybody anytime soon or probably ever. So if I was going to go light money on fire, this is what I would light it on fire, because it would give us the ability to potentially know what it could save us in the future and going on. But trying to do this without hiring a firm to do this is zero. You have zero shot in the dark to be even close to know what the total thing could potentially cost, because even if you do this, there's going to be some unintentional cost that you can't think of, that they didn't think of, that's going to come out of it.
Right, so, I mean, I agree that it would take some, someone highly qualified and detail-oriented to go in and look at these things. As I was reading the letter here from us to them, I don't know where it came from in the motion, but it was talking about for all agencies, that could be scaled and stuff. That's a much larger study, scaled study, as opposed to, and I read some more things in here about additional personnel and additional locations and additional equipment and stuff. And I like the word that's used there in the beginning. I think that, I'll make sure that's right. Yeah, from us to them. A baseline evaluation of each agency starts at, we're going to work with our existing facilities, we're going to work with our existing personnel, we're going to work with our existing equipment, all with the belief maybe that we can reach some financial efficiencies for taxpayers as well, not growing departments, not adding physical sites to it, not when we combine HR, for example, when we join businesses or organizations, we get to join HR. We might reap some benefits there from it that might offset some of the additional cost, whether it's pensions or retirements. But if we, and I have no clue, but if we had 10 HR people here that was handling it as a part of allocation, and we had 10 over there, could we do it with 12 in the future? I.e., 8 people are no longer needed in the administration of it because they join us or we join them. If they join us, obviously our personnel are staying and we don't need those other 8, but we've got HR already working. So are we giving up completely on any form of a study as far as a baseline study for each agency? Again, same buildings, same equipment, same personnel, let them do their thing, and they're not getting it overly complicated by, what was the word?
Let me clarify. Part of the motion was to design the best service for their areas. You want to design the best service, that's going to include an evaluation of stations, personnel, and equipment. Otherwise, you're a status quo. That's not a best service. That's a status quo.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the poison pill, isn't it? I mean, when you go, look, well, I mean, if we today, if that study were to come back and they said, at best, you need 8 more locations, 62 more personnel. Where's the line drawn? You know, it's like, well, I don't really, we're working pretty good with our existing staff. We're working great. We're working great with our existing locations. But once you start throwing in new buildings and more people to accommodate at best, it's really hard to compare apples to apples. Now, I don't know, I hear what you said about the motion, but I didn't see anything in the motion or hear anything in the motion about the using it scalable to allow other agencies to become part of the consolidated service approach. I have no idea where did that come from? Did that come from part of the motion, or was that from you in the letter only?
Well, again, it's best service. Would you want to exclude Okaloosa Island from wanting to come in once the study was done? Would you want to exclude Destin? Or is this specifically looking at Ocean City and Fort Walton and just wanting to get rid of one of the services?
I brought that up at the last meeting, as a matter of fact, because I was like, hey, shouldn't we have just, I mean, in my mind, just simply thinking, we should have Okaloosa County Fire Department. That's mine. I mean, but then when I brought that up, it was like, hey, let's just see if we can get these two together, because that's going to be a big hurdle to achieve. So I thought we got there, and then it leaves here and it comes back, and we've got to talk about everybody else again.
I tell you, I never said that. I said all the agencies.
No, it wasn't you. No, I'm saying it was from council up here, because I've said Okaloosa County Fire Department. It makes sense to me. Do we have districts and regions? Sure, but I've been told by others that are in the business of government that the pensions and retirements are a huge part of the obstacles causing anyone to join forces, which leaves the taxpayers on it. I got it. But the rest of the equation, the physical sites, the personnel, what we've already got, just compare it today. It doesn't mean that in the future that new organization doesn't say, we need 3 more. We need one in the north region, we need one down in the south region, and we need one in the east region. You know, that's continuing to get the best. But today, are you saying we're not the best in the Fort Walton Beach City Fire Department?
No, I'm saying we're great, but I'm saying we're also growing. You know, it was brought up about economic development, business is growing. Therefore, if you're paying for a study now, why not pay for a study that includes that expansion?
Because it might be cost prohibitive. I mean, if we can take a bite of it at $25,000 as opposed to a full one like this that might be $250,000.
What's more cost prohibitive? Doing a basic study now and then having to do another one in 5 years, or knocking it out now?
Well, it just these poison pills are everywhere in there. And when we've got 2 agencies that, as Mr. Schmidt has said, you two have gotten a good relationship going, you're having a discussion, but here it is potentially dying because they won't contribute any finances. And so I'm thinking, let's scale down the first observation to see if we can get a baseline evaluation, look at existing, not talking about future growth, not talking about making it scalable for, you know, I'm sure that the Okaloosa Island Fire Department, they'll probably have some resistance to joining, merging, acquired, and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think when we bring in other agencies, that is a poison pill. So just 2 agencies, which is where it started, here in Ocean City, to evaluate these 2 organizations coming together. So that would be my suggestion, instead of letting it die. Thank you for your effort, and let's go on. We talked about consolidation. Are we done talking about consolidation?
Can I answer that question? Yeah. The whole intent was to see and evaluate all those questions you just asked that none of us are specialties in. Those people provide that niche. The intention was to get some buy-in from the partnering agencies, the 2 agencies that provide services in the city of Fort Walton Beach, which are Ocean City Right and Fort Walton Beach, with the intent of the motion to see what's the best way to provide and to study what's the best way to provide the services for the residents of the business of the city of Fort Walton Beach. I just have, for whatever reason, have to respect their decision, but Ocean City Right's board has said we're not interested.
Sure.
So as much as we would all maybe agree on having a certain consolidated South End or Okaloosa or what the cost is for more apparatus, all of that could be discovered in the study that we could pay for, just sharing my interest or lack thereof. If they're not interested, the other agency's not interested in both financially as well as administratively, then I don't know how much more we could even progress if they're not gonna entertain or support that.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, sir.
One time before we have
Yes.
more. I just wanted to add to that, and I went along with this, and I appreciate this because we've been having this conversation, and to any person, it does make sense to say like, hey, these two overlapping agencies, you know, cover a lot of the same area. They are now working really well together. I think that's an excellent point that was brought up by Councilman Schmidt, and I credit Chief Morgan for that, and I credit their chief as well. It's just such a deal breaker to me if they're not interested in it. Like plain and simple. If they're not interested in it, then we're gonna pay a study, whatever that study costs, whether it's $5, whether it's $150,000, and then that study's gonna come back, and we're the one that paid for the study. It's our skin in the game. So then say that study says, well, you know what would be the best thing is for Ocean City to be a part of the City of Fort Walton Beach Fire Department. Here's all the great reasons why, and they back it all up, and it all makes sense to everybody, and we're like, wow, that's really great. What, are we gonna go knock on the door and hand that to them and say like, here you go, you're a part of us now? Like there's so many other things involved here, not just pensions, but special district, fire district, the governor, like everything is involved in this thing. And if they're not on board and wanting to find a solution to this, and I'm not saying they don't want to find a solution, I'm saying they don't want to pay money to be part of this study right now at this particular time.
Mr. Mayor.
So what I'm saying is, right now the best thing to do is not go with a study on our own to discover the facts that we already know, that we could already put together on our own. How much do we spend on fire control? How much do they charge as a rate, a millage rate, right? How much do they charge? So if you want to run all those numbers and figure out all those facts, like that information is available to the public. You can figure it out yourself. If you want detailed, like legit information, you're going to need access to both agencies. Period, plain and simple. Like, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meade.
So, with the police services conversation that happened some time ago, big discussion, and ultimately we put some protections in there for the police department. It was a similar conversation in the public safety, et cetera, but there, if we decided not to have a police department anymore, I'm just using this as an example. We have what I refer to, and it may not be a technical term, constitutional police services from the county. The sheriff still, we have enhanced services in the city. I can call the sheriff's department, or I can call the police department to come to my house if there's a need for police issues. If that was the case, or if the council as a group decided we no longer want to have a fire department, and I'm not suggesting we should in the least, what would happen then? Who would provide fire services to the residents within the city? Would the district, would there need to be a new district formed, or who would come to the 911 call?
Well, if a new district's formed, in the interim, it would be a mutual aid agreement that would come. But with, as if you're going to form a new district, it's going to go through the governor and whatnot. There's going to be a charge for services. For instance, a special district, Ocean City charges 2.75 mils. If you want to look at our budget, the general fund is roughly $32 million. Our budget's $7 million. That's 21.4% of the general fund. If you take 21.4% of the millage rate, 4.6116, then the citizens paying less than 1 mil for fire service, paying 0.98. So if we no longer existed, mutual aid agreements between the island and Ocean City would bring it in, but without creating a new district or and having the stations that we currently have, your service would go down, your response time would go down.
Sure. And I'm not suggesting in the least, that's just a question I didn't know the answer to. So if tomorrow, and once again, I'm not in favor of changing anything, but the answer is the neighboring districts would provide fire control or prevention or protection.
Yeah, but if you chose to go with them as your fire service, then there's a fee that's going to come with that.
Sure. An equivalent or to that millage rate. Would the special district, would you think, move into the city, or would there be a new special district formed?
Honestly, if you blink your eyes and we no longer existed, that's a problem that you all have to solve. I mean, it's a dozen different ways. I mean, create a new district, bring them into the city, bring them across the board into the city, start a volunteer fire brigade. I mean, who knows? That would be, and the protections that are passed for the police department were also passed for the fire department as well. So those exist.
So if we reduce the budget that would prohibit the requisite fire services, then we would need to either pay for enhanced services from another district if they were willing to, or form another
Correct.
district, which we just reduced.
Correct.
So, and how much would a study cost? Did they give you a ballpark?
Before I say it, I'm going to say this is a generic call. It was a generic proposal.
Sure.
It did not include it. And it was $53,000 for one.
Mr. Smith?
So, to sit here and think that the motion that David made last time we were here was going to be the end-all be-all, and we were going to sit down and we were going to have this discussion, was a pipe dream. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. You got so many hands involved and so many people with different opinions. I get told no 52 times a day by every single person that buys a car from us, and we have 3 to 10 people a day buy a car from us. No is where you start, not where you finish. So if they're telling me no, I'm not just going to give up, because I believe it's something that could potentially save our residents and their residents a lot of money. And this board of 7 or their board of 5 should not control that whole thing. The people that put us 7 up here and the people that put them 5 up there on their board are the people that control everything. So getting the information into their hands and deciphering it properly, they'll be the ones to decide what happens at the end of the day, not those 5 and not us 7 really at the end of the day. They'll tell us what they want us to do. And if it's cost that's preventing us, like I said before, we've spent a lot more money on things that made no consequences. If I've got to go spend $60,000 to figure out maybe we can save $10 or $12 million over the next 50 years, I'm going to consider that money well spent. Now, what comes out of that, whether it actually happens or not, I'm okay with whatever the people decide one way or another. But I'm committed to getting the information. So what I probably would like to know is from these companies, if you have someone on the other side that may not be administratively wanting to help, can we still get the information with that being a roadblock in our way?
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to public records request for everything.
I mean, if they can get the information and put a report together, I don't really care how they get it, whether they physically hand it to them or if they do a FOIA request so we can look at it. And then after that, we can sit here and, we can let everybody else argue. But I believe, from what I recall, because I do remember watching the study where the sheriff came in here with the police department, that obviously we didn't get rid of our police department. But the sheriff came in here in that consolidation study, and I want to say, from what I recall, the number was maybe $3 million, $2 or $3 million is what the sheriff could do the same job that they said the city could do. And in the end result of that study, the fire department, the police department got more protections. The people figured out, or the council figured out, that the people wanted their fire department, but they figured out ways to trim the budget, and I think they trimmed $1 million out of the budget, from what I recall.
I don't know how long that lasted though.
Yeah, it never does. It never does. But.
And how long does the savings last, and how long does the control last? I mean, that's another thing that we've not brought up, and we could certainly have those discussions. I'm all for investigating the opportunity, and that's why I voted for the motion. That's why I supported Councilman Schmidt's motion originally, was because I thought it would be a good thing to finally get this out there, and let's go for it. Let's figure it out, right? We've all talked about it, we've all heard about it. It all hangs over everyone's head. I don't personally think it's a good idea to lose the city's control over its fire or police protection at all.
I don't think we even know the answer to that because we haven't had a study.
I didn't say you knew the answer to it, but I said potentially, if you lose the control of your fire services or police services, then if the providing agency, whomever that is, decides that, well, now we're going to need a little more next year, and now we're going to need to build a new station, and now we're going to need to do this, and by the way, it's us or nobody.
Well, but
So
that's
those are-
why in
so-
our
so that's why
charter, the
it's
people
great
make the
that
decision, not
ours-
us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So-
And that's why they elect us to make those types of decisions.
We don't make the decision on that,
On what?
on whether we have a fire department or a police department. The charter puts it in the people's hands. It got to go to a referendum, unless it's a unanimous vote.
Or
Or
you can reduce the budget. And so, but back to your point, we had a study, we obtained a lot of public input and said for the savings of $1 million, it's worth
keeping our own.
Keeping our own. Yeah.
I've heard, Mr. Mayor, I've heard that story before told by previous council members, and I listened and wasn't there. I haven't gone back and looked at the videos. I think you were on council with the one council member, but the way I had it explained to me was that these discussions came up and that the sheriff came in with a proposed savings, and then, like you said, the fire chief at the time, the police chief at the time went and was able to save $1 million from the budget that had been proposed. So it was short-lived that $1 million was there. So that's not where I was going with this. Where I was going with this was that why don't we have one or more people that conduct such studies and has faced situations like this come before us and say, guys, I hear what you're talking about, but here's how you do it. I'm like, oh my God, that's genius.
When that happened, I mean, Chief Morgan, he kind of expressed some opinions on how we need to do this and recommended us getting the study to do this. But where my biggest challenge is all the things that we're examining that have gone on for many, many years and arguably decades on the consolidation conversation since early 90s, and some of the studies that you shared with me that happened in the 2000s as well. But where I get hung up on is, even if the study comes back and it's a great idea, maybe that would be enough to influence their commission. But if their commission's not on board, at some point, our state delegation, our legislative body has to get involved. And I just really don't see them moving forward if they have one agency saying, yes, let's do it, one agency saying no. Hey, y'all figure it out. So I just haven't, that's where I get hung up.
But I'm not reading that, I'm not hearing that. All I'm hearing and reading is that they don't want to financially support a study. Okay? So and administratively, which might be, we don't want to turn over the numbers or something along those lines just yet, but I'm talking about a specialist that specializes in studies, pre-study, pre-50,000, pre-100,000, that we have a number of them come up here and present to us and say, guys, we'll put a study together for you. Let's start out with a baseline evaluation. That'll study your existing. We'll look at personnel. We'll look at retirements, and we'll show you how those things all work out. They have previously based on what we've done or others have done. And for that, that's the initial blow of $35,000 or whatever it turns out to be. And then I have a feeling, and I would hope it would come from ours as well, is that as we continue to go on, if the results say that, look guys, it looks like you can have the same level of service or better if you will merge with you. Now, to say that Ocean City wouldn't be interested in merging with us, we would have to assume the other, that y'all wouldn't be interested in merging with them. So it's a moot point. If neither one, I mean, we're sitting here pointing fingers at them saying they're not interested in it. The only thing I've seen is they're not interested in financially supporting a study. They might be interested in joining
merging, coming up with this new, that's always the details that have to be worked out. But that's where someone coming up here before a number of entities, again, I think if we just assumed that there was a $50,000 or $100,000 available for a study, there'd probably be a number of people that show up here at the podium and suggest to us why they might be the best ones to lead us in that discovery process.
I just want to make a comment on that. We can't legally do that. We have to do closed bid RFQs.
I'm not looking for a bid from anyone. I'm wanting someone to come in here and just to make a presentation about how these studies can go. And we might get 3 presentations, no financials. They said they can range from $25,000 to $250,000 depending on it. But just hearing what you guys are talking about, we can get you a baseline evaluation. I would, them being the consultant professionals, we would suggest that you start with a baseline evaluation, which would include these 12 things. Start there and see what shows up. And if that makes it past that point, you can go to stage 2. The next presentation comes up and says, no, don't do it that way, do it this way. We only do the 6 things. Okay, well then we as a council up here go, yeah, for $18,000, I wouldn't mind learning about our facilities and learning about the cost of retirements and pensions. And they might say, look, retirement and pensions come last, or they come first. One says, no, we always do it first. One says, oh, do that last. I don't know. We're not the experts on conducting studies. We're experts at paying for them. But you know what I'm saying? I would like to have some experts up here pitching to us their services, not for a cost. I'm not asking for a bid up here for this. I'm asking, how would you professionals lead us to apparently the answers we all want? I want a consultant to come up here and kind of point us in the right direction. So yeah, you know, just start with these 3 or 4 or 5, and we're going to be footing it ourselves without Ocean City Right to begin with, because they've said they're not interested in it. But you know, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 is different than 100,000, and still can give us insight and or at least knowledge.
Mr. Berry.
Chief Morgan, why do you why do you want to join with Ocean City Right?
Oh, like I said,
well, then why are we even doing this?
Because council is
Hold on now. We got a unanimous vote. Not because Councilor Schmidt motioned it. We had a unanimous vote.
But you did motion it, though.
I did
so.
motion
I'm
it.
doing what I'm told.
But I
I'm doing what I'm told.
there you go.
You're my boss. I'll do what I'm told.
Okay, so we told you to go ask Ocean City Right to join us?
To do a study.
To do a study?
Yes.
And in that study included Fort Walton Beach going to Ocean City Right, or the scope of the study if it were to move forward. Ocean City Right going to Fort Walton, Fort Walton going to Ocean City Right, and the third option of there being a new special district that encompasses a brand new name. Yeah. Is that right, Chief
And
Morgan?
if this helps any at all, is to my understanding that they pass certain state statutes that requires financial audits by the unions. And because of that, several locals have chose to consolidate under Fort Walton's union, Local 2601. However, Ocean City chose not to. So if the union doesn't want to consolidate with us and the commissioners don't want to consolidate with us, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, and that's what I'm hearing, the people that I've been talking to. They don't want to consolidate. You know.
I don't know if they would have the information to
Yeah.
know whether they would want to or wouldn't.
You know.
I don't like them. They're bad. They're good. They're bad.
Sorry, guys.
We need data.
I think we're at the point where we probably need a motion one way or the other to how to proceed, because we can sit here all night and shoot arrows back and forth.
I'll make a motion. Oh, yeah, public.
Come on.
Hello, Scott Smith, Bay Drive, 5th Bay Drive, in reference to the consolidation efforts. So I'll read a brief statement. By consolidating and outsourcing fire service, council presents, council president, future will lose the control of the operational costs. For example, if fire service are outsourced and the providing servicer unilaterally decides to purchase a
multi-million-dollar apparatus, the fire truck, et cetera. As Mr. Walker pointed out earlier, that these costs are then going to be transferred to the customer, i.e. the municipality. Even if the study does of consolidation would save money, consolidate in one direction or the other, the reality is that Ocean City over the years has always said they're not interested in consolidating. They're not interested. Their council, their council is just as powerful as this council or as any of the commissions because of the governing districts as well. So if they're not even interested into it, it would take to force their hand. It's like forced annexation of property. To force their hand in the process with that would have to go through the governor's office to do so, right? I mean, the foreseeable costs associated with that are insurmountable. If you offer them to provide service to us, your minimum cost is going to be 2.75 mils from Ocean City. It's 3+ on the island. And then obviously there's no one else that's going to be Rosa's volunteer, and then Destin's not going to take over it. So your options are locally Ocean City or Island, and both of those are 2.75 versus 3+ mils as well. So just by looking at the simple math associated with that, it doesn't appear that it's going to cost any less than what we already have. And this council and future councils currently have the control over whether you buy or spend money in the fire service or not. If you outsource it, you're up to their discretion. So I think spending the money on the study is a waste of money, even if it comes back and says, hey, y'all should consolidate, right? Because a whole county fire that the county run, sure. It's like having the deputy, Department of Sheriff, running the whole law enforcement for the county versus none of the municipalities, Niceville, Crestview, Fort Walton, or any of the others having their own law enforcement, right? So, other point I was going to say was that Cinco Bayou outsources, Shalimar outsourced out to Ocean City, and they're at 2.75 plus their current millage, and their millage total is greater than the city of Fort Walton Beaches. So I don't see how it's going to save any money just by looking at millage operation and the cost that it would be to operate. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Lori, go ahead.
I've talked, one moment. I've been talking to all the fire departments around here. They don't want to consolidate. So my thinking is, if you're happy where you are, we have mutual aid already. We're all helping each other already. Why consolidate? There's no reason to. Go ahead.
Mr. Neri, go ahead.
Well, and this is an opinion, I don't have the knowledge that the previous speaker has, but I do know that I was a victim of a lightning fire. And there was an argument, apparently, I didn't conduct this, one of my tenants did. They called the fire department, and there was an argument as to which district, was it Fort Walton or was it Ocean City? And so there was a delay in the response because they didn't know who was supposed to respond. And meanwhile, my house is burning. So I'm with Mr. Smith in that when you get an answer of no, to me, that means you don't K and OW enough and you need more information. So I agree with Mr. Walker and Mr. Smith is that if you have more information that is current and includes all the given that Mr. Smith has brought up, then everybody is a little more knowledgeable about where we stand and whether it is 6 buildings or 2 buildings or no buildings in the future. You can predict that with the growth management. But until you know the numbers as to where you could save money or not, because it ended up, in my case, both fire departments showed up. And to me, that was a huge waste of money, So it's just, I'm in favor, I'm not usually in favor of spending money. I'm usually pretty hard on things about the council, but in this case, I think there ought to be a study to get all the parameters so that all the factors are considered, so.
Excuse me, Mayor. Can I have Chief Morgan come up and just?
Yes.
Chief Morgan, would there ever be a situation ever in the world, in our area, in our county, not world, in our county, in our city, in Ocean City Rapids Fire Control District, where someone would call 911 and say, my house is on fire, and there would be an argument about who is going to go there?
No, there's not. I honestly take offense to that statement, because when we have a structured response, it's not.
This was like 25 years ago.
I'm speaking, let me speak. I promise there's 4 units that go to every structure fire. It don't matter what unit they're going to, it's us. I'll be happy to can pull the report of wherever it was, and you will see that there was never an argument, there's never a delay. When it's unprofessional, it would be unprofessional for us, be unprofessional for them. If anything I can say is every fire department in this county is a professional organization. And they don't worry about it, because we don't charge money to the citizen, it's a free service. So who cares what district it is?
And through the mutual aid agreement, regardless, if you guys are showing up to a structure fire, an actual structure fire, they're also showing up to a structure fire.
Correct. Because NFPA standard says we send 4 units. That covers attack, backup, water supply, and a rapid intervention team.
Thank you.
Chief Morgan, I will say, we had a response at our house, Fairway Court, about 14 years ago. Both departments showed up within seconds of each other, and it was very professionally done. Both departments knew exactly what they were doing. It was a thing of beauty.
And if you see us on scene, I promise you, it's like a family reunion. Nobody's bickering.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, can we go?
I was misunderstood, or maybe I'm just not politically correct. I wasn't the one who made the call. I'm just.
You get 5 minutes every time you go there?
No, ma'am.
Or is it just 5 minutes total?
So, I don't know how much of an argument there was. I know that whoever showed up was.
Can you have that discussion off the record? Because that doesn't matter. Can you have that privately with them? I mean, this count.
You're to talk to us.
Mr. Nary, yeah.
Okay, well, so if you heard that there was a delay, no, I'm just repeating what my tenant said. So I didn't mean it to be offensive. Everybody who did show up was very professional. So I apologize if it came across that I was criticizing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
That's all.
All right, council, we've debated this way long enough. We need a motion one way or the other.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have a motion to instruct staff to continue to pursue the fire consolidation feasibility study without Ocean City Rights assistance.
Second for discussion.
All right, it's been moved by Councilman Smith, second by Councilman Walker to continue to pursue the fire consolidation study without Ocean City's rights participation.
I mean, for years, and even Chief said it when we originally talked about this. You ready to put it to bed? I'm ready to put it to bed, Chief. And getting told no and going and giving up right off the bat's just not in my nature. So we can do this. We can do this without them. We can gather all the information that we need. I guess I would have one caveat to the scope of work is it's with our current existing services and not any expansion of services. What we have currently right now and what they currently have right now. Outside of that, you know, I'm willing to spend the money to get this thing figured out, put it out there to the public, and whatever happens at that point will happen.
All right, sir.
So I don't know where the friendly amendments come in, if necessary, if we have to vote or what, but let me go and then y'all can correct me and tell me which way to go. But, you know, I like that. Definitely, I'm of the same opinion. It's not going to die that quickly. Don't take no. But I think there is an option or an opportunity to have one or more, and it may be, you know, I don't know if it's by RFQ, I'm not saying that, but identify 3 consulting study firms that would conduct such studies to come make a presentation to us on why we should select them. And I think from that we'll at least hear some, you know, suggestions on about experience, what they did. So prior to, I don't think you said to spend any money. That wasn't, you just told them to continue to pursue it, which I think that pursuance of it could have 1 or more presentations up here by firms that conduct such studies to come before us and speak, if that's an amendment. Or could yours include it? I don't know. You're the one that, you know, there. So I just want to hear from some specialists that specialize in consolidation. And tell us about our problems.
Just for clarification, if that were to pass, what you would have to do is send out the RFQ to get the sealed bids in, and then as a council, you could require the top 3 or something to come sell themselves, but just openly ask people to come in here. An RFQ would be a sealed process.
Well, let me clarify then. I'm not talking about an RFQ then, because the people that I want to be up here are making a sales pitch about themselves, their services, and why we might want to consider them, and the best practices on conducting. And it may be a 6-step process for a consolidation study. You start with 1, which reviews these 2 things first, and then after it comes to council, we look at those 2 things, and do we decide to go forward or kill it then? And then we say, no, man, it looks good. It looks like there's some things happening. Yeah, I don't know. They're the specialists. We're not the specialists. Can we get someone up here to talk to us about best practices in conducting a study prior to an RFQ where everybody's got a bid? I don't want bids. I'm not asking for a bid. Are you asking for a bid?
Well, I think the intent is when you ask for the bid, you can have the sealed bids, and whoever submits the bids are the people that are going to come up here and explain what you want to know, versus trying to go out and get people before they even have any interest in it to come in here and tell you, you know, what the deal is.
Consultants, man, they love coming in to share they love consulting. And they know that if they consult well, they're going to be likely to, you know, submit a bid. And
I kind of like Jeff's way better, because people are willing to submit a bid. They're obviously interested, and if they're interested, I want to talk to them. So.
And Jeff follows policy.
I'm sorry?
Jeff follows policy.
Well, we know that sometimes we can modify policies to accommodate wishes. We know that. So, you know, I was just thinking about a consultant, but so your motion was to move forward consolidation study, but with existing, not scalable.
The only change I'll have is because David's original motion was for an RFQ. The only alteration I will have to continue to pursue his original RFQ is that we evaluate our existing buildings, services, people that we have for not any, I don't want to add any expansion into the study.
It doesn't cost to get that. Maybe I'll come back with another one later. If it doesn't make it in, I'm not going to let it die then either. So we'll see.
Excuse me. So the motion on the floor right now is to continue to pursue the consolidation study without Ocean City Right, using services as they currently stand.
Existing services, yes, sir.
And Mr. Walker, you seconded that for discussion?
I did.
My question is, they've already, Ocean City Right has already said, hey, I don't want any part of paying for anything. Why are we even pursuing to go further, you know, and pay for a study that they've already said they're not interested in helping pay for a study or even going halvesies? That tells me a lot.
Because people tell me every day when they come into my dealership they're not buying a car, and guess what they do? Buy a car. If they don't have the information, how can they know what's going on or how they can make a decision? You got to get the information in front of them, and whatever happens at that point happens. It's kind of like the petitions. You only got 1,500, 1,800 of them signed. That doesn't mean it's going to pass and everybody's going to do it. But you got enough information out there to get it on a ballot, to get in front of people so they can make their own informed decision on what they want.
So have we even asked the people? This is what we did when
We've got to get the information first and get it to them.
Yeah, and this is years and years ago. I was here when we voted to keep our fire department, our police department, and not join sheriff.
And that is still part of the process. You will still have to ask the people once you find the information out whether they still want to keep, whether they want to do whatever comes of the report or not, if it gets to that stage.
All right. Anyone else? Mr. Meade?
What if you write to the governor and ask for an advisory opinion on what happens if you dismantle fire services in the city? I'm not, I mean, taken to its extreme, would they implement a new district? Would they force a merger?
I would think that would probably be more of a nuclear option for me than anything, but I would like to do it I'd like to do it in a way that I think that they get to participate in, because ultimately it affects them and it affects us. So I don't want to do it in a way that the fire department doesn't get to participate in it.
I will support finding out more information, probably more along the line of Mr. Allegretto, where I'm in favor of maintaining our control and our own fire services, but I'm not opposed to listening, gaining more information, and continuing to make an educated decision. So I will support your motion.
Can I ask one question? And it simply is this: if we're going to basically do the study regardless of their participation, why is it always Ocean City and Fort Walton? Why is no one ever reaching to the island? The island is actually closer to us than Ocean City is, but it seems like it always comes up Ocean City, Fort Walton, Ocean City, Fort Walton. And they've said they didn't want to participate financially administratively. The island said they didn't want to participate financially administratively, but the island's never included.
So I can answer that from my standpoint. I believe you eat the elephant one bite at a time. And we actually touch Ocean City. We don't actually touch the island.
They're closer to our district, though.
How can they be closer when we touch?
They cross the bridge. They're like 2 miles away.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I mean,
we
we have a larger border with Ocean City right than we do with the Okaloosa Island Fire Department. You got a natural barrier, in my opinion, with that bridge trying to get over. I mean, police department knows what the traffic situation's like, so, I mean, to me, it makes sense for Ocean City right, because they're Fort Walton, we're Fort Walton, our boundaries cross all over the place. I know that another big part of it is the run cards. I believe they control the run cards.
No, we all control our own run cards.
Well, don't they have priority though?
Nope.
I thought me and Brunswick and
every district has their own priority over their own run cards, over their own district.
Because
in their own district.
For what comes our priority?
Yeah, there's issues with the run cards when you guys are closer out of district to somebody, that they get to control the run cards and they don't let you respond when you're closer than they go, and that may have been what the
any
exact
department
issue
choose to
was.
do that,
Yeah.
we do not do that.
So.
And that was some of the improvement I was alluding to earlier on, where a few years ago, when we started this conversation with 5 different chiefs, that run card wasn't so healthy. And because of your leadership, and Chief Bundrick and now Chief Morgan, that relationship has improved. Yeah, that's it for now.
Anyone else from council? Anybody else? One last shot from the public before we have a vote. I can say none. Council, please vote. And it does pass 4-3. Thank you, council. I'll take us to item 12, city manager reports. Mr. Peters.
Yeah, Mayor, just real briefly, we've got Tuesday, the 25th of June, we've got 4 p.m. code enforcement workshop, followed by the regular council meeting at 6 p.m., which we will also, we've got the special meeting for the proposed millage, followed by the regular meeting immediately after the millage.
Sir, thank you. Ms. Cobb.
I was going to give you all an update on the Form 6, but I sent you an email, so it's late. If anyone has questions, just call me.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Mead, my final shot.
Mr. Peters, we've generally discussed a study we did a long time ago, Bill Parkway. If you're heading south, turn left on Walton Park. It seems to be some fairly straightforward cones that we could put up to help with some traffic safety. I'd like to know if that got picked back up or where it is or what we're doing. Maybe for the code enforcement, I know it's late, but I would like to discuss what we're doing with the pontoon rentals. Are we enforcing the ordinance that are on the book? I'd like to know, what are we doing now to enforce what we have, and how are we enforcing it? And I'm very excited about our meeting, because I think code enforcement is a very important, essential part of the city. If we don't enforce the rules, what's the point of having any rules? So look forward to that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Schmidt.
Looking forward to and want to encourage everyone to get out tomorrow morning. There'll be a ceremony at the walking trail by the conference center on the island for Women's Veterans Day. Just want to encourage you all to get out there tomorrow morning at 7:30. That's all I got tonight, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith?
I'll get Jeff afterwards to ask him what I thought I was going to ask him, which has now changed, so.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
And I didn't have this on my list until about 45 seconds ago. So yeah, Jeff, if I don't know how this typically works, but with that motion and that passing and it coming over to you, as you get ready to prepare the RFQ, could you give us a courtesy copy of it days or in advance of sending it out? You've given him no specific time to get one, so if you could give us by email a couple of days to chew on it, maybe it'll come back to council next time to maybe adjust. I don't know. I mean, my definition of a basic study for an RFQ versus what he might want, maybe some further discussion once you put together the initial RFQ. Let us all look at it and see if we can scale it down, scale it up, or anything else, if you could there. And was there, there was a report on that lighting downtown from some neighbors that complained about it. I happened to be down there the next night, and you know, it looks like activities shut off around 8 or 9. You know, people aren't playing out there anymore. I mean, have you had discussions about either putting a timer? Because I know I don't know, do we have timers over at Ferry on those tennis lights? I mean, if nobody's active on them for 15 or 30 minutes, they go off.
It's on. You got to manually turn them on, and then
Okay.
they automatically turn off. Unless you can manually turn
Turn it
off,
back
but
on.
they'll automatically turn off at 10.
Oh, at 10.
The ferry.
Okay, at Ferry. Have you had discussions with the business owner down here with those lights? I mean, they are distinctly different than what's been down there. I know that citizen complaint came through.
Yeah, they went through the permit process, and the permit it passed, and it was approved by code.
Mhm.
So they were fine.
Okay.
It's different, which is probably why that came from. It's just a change. But
They
yeah,
called it light pollution into their property, and that's, you know, a citizen's complaint. I get it. I mean, if that's what they're allowed to have, then, I mean,
But they do have a timer on those as well.
do they, what time do they go off?
I'm not sure.
I think I was down there after 10. But-
Yeah, 10 o'clock, I believe.
Okay, well, that's that. And then as far as the pontoon rentals, Chris, I don't know. I have one citizen
that contacts me regularly, and I know you guys have been working on it, so I said give them time. But, you know, it's kind of tricky for you guys because they're kind of operating out of a house. I don't think they have a business tax, you know, and that was the problem when the pontoon moratorium came up. There were people complaining about pontoons, but there was no way to distinguish them between, you know, a legally operating person doing bad things and someone operating out of their back of their house, and they're going to pick them up out at Publix. I've heard they were picking them up at Publix, driving them via a van to the house, putting them on there, and then going out of the back. So, you know, that's two problems for sure.
There are certainly ways we can still handle them on the residential. I've worked with Ms. Cobb as well on that, and Councilman Smith as well. And there's definitely ways we can still enforce the code and restrict that use in the residential neighborhoods. So if you have any specific addresses or information that you'd like to pass along, we can absolutely follow up on it. We've been trying to gather as many pictures and all. We're planning to take the ones that we have.
I think you've heard from him on it, but I'll check with him to make sure.
Sure.
I think he's been in contact with you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, just since it's my turn next, I just wanted to very briefly for our workshop that's coming up on code enforcement. Number one, I want to thank you. And I appreciate, I know you've got a lot of work to do every single day of your life for this city and a lot to deal with, and putting all this together probably is also a lot of work on top of a lot of work. So thank you. My main interest in wanting to have this workshop was to kind of go over not only the large scope of code enforcement, as Councilman Meade said, it is super important. As Councilman Jeter said earlier, enforce the code. Agreed strongly with both of those. I really kind of want to have a time where we can drill down on what codes matter most to our city and to our residents, right? That's not to say that any of them don't matter, but just like if I call the police department and I say, my neighbor is being a real jerk and he's come over and, you know, spray painted some stuff on my grass, and I know it's him, he's got red on his hands and it's red paint, right? The police will come to my house, but it is the lowest priority on their list, right? So it's not the same as if somebody stabs me in the arm and I call 911, they're coming right away, right? So there are priorities, and I kind of want to just drill down on those.
Absolutely.
During that meeting. So I don't want to catch you off guard.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
by
it.
me saying like, hey man, just like I did basically with calling a workshop for code enforcement. I would give you this heads up that I'm really interested in kind of going over that kind of stuff and just getting your thoughts and your thinking on it and what that is versus what we as a council have gathered from the public that we've heard. You know what I mean? And try to make those two merge.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it for sure. Because we'll put I'm going to have a PowerPoint to go through the various topics, and I can have a section on there, with some different ideas for discussion. We can move stuff around.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berry.
I look forward to the workshop also. I have a lot of questions, and I'm slowly getting them clarified. I may not agree with them, but we can have the discussion. I like having the discussion on that. I look forward to that. Light pollution. I can talk about light pollution. Let me tell you, I can talk about.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. 10 o'clock is whenever those lights go off now. Took me 10 years to get. So, yeah. And the noise is much better. As a matter of fact, I'm having some work done on my house, and they says, Gloria, all that noise. I said, I can deal with this. These kids are having fun. They're playing, I says, the music that they're playing, we finally got it down to a nice noise level, and the lyrics are nice and not lewd. I appreciate that. So, and we got our safety netting over there. So my neighborhood says thank you, and it's working. It's taken us a long time to get there. And light pollution, I can go for it. I can tell you all about it. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Mr. Jeter.
Good night, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I've only got 2 things to say, as David Schmidt offered. Tomorrow morning, 7:45, at Women's Veterans Park, which is right behind the convention center.
Yeah.
It's going to be the very nice ceremony, and I encourage folks that are up that early to come out and participate. And then tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, I believe the police department's still doing the bike ride at Oakland Heights Athletic Complex. It starts at 5, so for those of you bikers, especially with young people and want to come out and ride bikes with the youngsters among us, 5 o'clock, Oakland Heights Athletic Complex. And with that,